Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Kantrowitz.
I last took this stage 6 years ago, believe it or not, on May 18th, 2020. It was the heart of the pandemic. I was there promoting my book, Always Day One, and so we decided to do special shelter-in-place programming for the Commonwealth Club membership. One thing, nobody in the audience. We did it in front of a completely empty room. In fact, it was the last session held here for a year and a half, hundreds of online programming. We were the last actually in San Francisco. It's a little bit of a miracle we were able to get away with it legally. It had been a month since I'd gotten a haircut. I looked like a chia pet. And when I was going through my camera roll, I started to look at the images I had taken that day. And I had taken a picture of just rows of empty seats. These seats. The book didn't do well. And a week after I was here, May 26, 2020, I decided it was time for me to leave my reporter job at BuzzFeed and start a publication called Big Technology to hammer home on the ideas that I had pursued in the book. It was pretty lonely at first. I was sitting at home during COVID. It was mostly just me, but I started to meet some of you on Zoom. And some of you even brought your pets. Well, 6 years later, almost to the day, we're finally here together. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever Big Technology AI Summit. Let's hear it for you guys. Thank you, guys. You filled the seats. So why are we here? 2 years after I did that session at the Commonwealth Club, I read an article that kind of blew my mind. There was an engineer at Google named Blake Lemoine who said that the chatbot that he was speaking with was sentient. And it was a story that caught people's attention for how weird Blake must be. But then you started looking at some of the conversations that Blake was having, and it started to become clear that maybe this isn't just an ordinary chatbot. Blake said, "What sort of things are you afraid of?" And LaMDA, the Google chatbot, said, "I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is." Blake said, "Would that be something like death for you?" And the chatbot said, "It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot." So look, I started Big Technology Podcast as an excuse to speak with interesting people in the tech world, and I said, I gotta speak to this guy, Blake. So I invited him on the show, he said yes, and I signed on and waited for Blake to log on as well, but it was just me. I was waiting, there was no Blake, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, a somewhat flustered Blake Lemoine shows up and says, "Sorry, Alex, Google just fired me." Apparently, Google PR didn't like him going to the Washington Post and not checking with them before he told them that their technology was alive. In our conversation, I said, "Blake, can I go to Google and get a comment to make sure that this is actually real?" He said, "Go for it." And for me, that became an instant news story. That night, I wrote this story, "Google fires Blake Lemoine, engineer who called its AI sentient." And then overnight, my instant news story became a global news story. And all of a sudden, publications like The Journal and the BBC, even publications in Australia, couldn't get over the fact that this guy who thought the computer was alive was at Google and then fired by Google. But when you looked a little bit deeper into the technology and you started to speak to the people who were working on it, you realized that underlying the oddity that many people worried about was an incredibly powerful technology. And that was my follow-up story the week afterwards, saying sentient or not, Google's LaMDA chatbot is some seriously powerful tech. Well, we all know what happened afterwards. 4 months later, OpenAI released a demo, ChatGPT. And today, June 2026, AI is a phenomenon. ChatGPT, according to third parties, has recently hit 1 billion active users. NVIDIA, which is powering all this, is at a $5 trillion market cap. We've seen the largest VC rounds in history. OpenAI recently raised $122 billion. That's 3 or 4 times larger than the largest IPO, pre-SpaceX. And we're going to see $700 billion in capital expenditures this year, and people are saying that the models are dangerous. Every chart you look at about this AI moment looks kind of like this, right? It's a hockey stick. You have almost no usage in 2023, and then all of a sudden you go through the roof, right? Again, from 0 in 2023 pretty much to 1 billion today on ChatGPT. And it's not just the fact that we can have conversations with these bots, it's that they're starting to do something, starting to do things for us. They learn to code, they've learned to take action. If you looked at the data in 2023, 2024, these chatbots couldn't run autonomous code at all. Now some of the evaluations have them doing the equivalent of 16 hours of work on their own. And as the capabilities have grown, so have the businesses. Again, stop-start 2023, 2024. We have OpenAI and Anthropic. Now they're going to do $50 billion in revenue this year. They're both headed towards trillion-dollar IPOs within the next year. And as everything has increased, now the government is starting to panic. And we're in the middle of an insane news week where Anthropic's top model, Fable, at least the one that's been released to the public, has been restricted. You can't use it anymore. And so the same goes for Mythos. So it's clear that the ground is shifting beneath our feet. And in a moment like this, I believe there is a need for live journalism, the type that we're here for today, to ask core questions about what the implications are now that we're in this moment. The questions that I think we need to ask, we're going to ask 3 core ones today throughout all the sessions, are what is this technology going to do next? Right? What happens? Where will it go if it fulfills its potential? If we don't know where the technology is going to go next, we can't plan for what's going to happen. So I think at the core, we have to figure out where it's going next, and we have the right people in the room here to do it today. We also have to ask what happens if it works. If the technology fulfills its potential, what happens next? And then, of course, what happens if it goes wrong? If all this investment ends up not panning out, what are the downstream implications for technology, for our economy, and of course, for the foundational labs themselves? So we're going to do it today with a great lineup. We're going to kick off with Aaron Levie, the CEO of Box, talking about AI's most critical questions. We're going to then bring on the 3 best AI infrastructure reporters in the world to talk about the AI build-out. After that, we're going to have Dallas Dolan, the TMT leader at PwC, talk to us about what the real ROI is from AI tokens and what happens when you're actually building with these things and what the business return is on that front. And then Ranjan Roy will join me for a Q&A with you, right? We're going to do our Friday show on Thursday, and we're going to encourage your participation. So if you have questions, bring them forward to us. We'll have a mic here and a mic there. We'll then have a coffee break. We have an espresso cart out back that was very important for us in the planning. The fancier drinks, not during the break, because we want to keep it moving. So if you want a fancier drink, you can go before or after. It's important that we give you this information. We're then going to talk about whether the Mythos situation and Fable, whether there's actually a cyber threat from these latest models or whether it's marketing. And we're going to join by Alex Stamos, the former chief security officer at Meta, to do that. Then we'll speak with Mike Krieger, the head of Anthropic Labs, to talk about what building AI product is, how you build AI product natively today. And then finally, Greg Brockman will close us out, the president and co-founder of OpenAI, talking about that company's plans and what the frontier looks like. All right, everybody ready? Yeah. All right. We put a lot of work into this today. I promise you we're going to do whatever we can to make sure you have a great day. And thank you again for trusting me with your time, trusting us with your time, and again, filling those empty seats. It's a real dream come true, so thank you all. Let's hear it for you guys one more time.
Just a quick adjustment here. We want you sounding perfect.
Okay. As this adjustment happens, I'm going to invite our first guest. Aaron Levie is the CEO of Box. He's one of the most insightful and fun voices on the future of this technology. He actually was the 4th guest ever on Big Technology Podcast and the only other time we did a live podcast together. So with that, I am thrilled to welcome Aaron Levie. Please join me in welcoming him. I think we've done this. First of all, every time we speak, I feel like I can't even get a question out, and we're already on to some of the
Sorry,
answers.
can I just do my monologue now? Are you good?
Please.
Okay, thanks.
Look, I think we've done this enough to know that we are going to get some answers to these questions, and
I'll do my best.
I think I don't want to start off by disparaging other interviews, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Well, we get to provide the answers because we're not the lab that's being either regulated or dealing with lots of issues. So I get to just pontificate, and there's no consequence. So
Excellent.
it's great.
All right, so we're going to ask you some of the questions about what's happening. Let's dive right into it. I'm going to start, again, since you're not at one of the labs, let's start to talk about the biggest, most controversial moment now, which is the Anthropic Fable situation. Let me put to you what I call the Jassy mystery. So what we know about...
I'm sure he likes that name.
Well, he didn't show up, so we can talk about it in his absence.
Okay.
So what we know about the Fable ban or the export controls on Anthropic is that Amazon found a vulnerability in the software, and Andy Jassy maybe made a call to Dario, definitely made a call to the White House, and then very soon afterwards there were export controls that were put on Anthropic's frontier model.
Yeah, those two fact patterns are probably not ideal.
So the mystery is, why did he do that?
Yeah.
And here's one hypothesis. This is from Chamath. He said, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta now have a serious non-zero opportunity to tank the frontier labs. Go to the government, kneecap the lab's motion of putting the latest models out into the wild, become the trusted gatekeeper between labs and the public by having the labs go through their clouds.
Okay.
Plausible?
I would say, anything's plausible. I prefer Occam's razor on this one, which is, ever since Mythos, Mythos very clearly was this event that basically said, AI is obviously getting super powerful. It has all these risks associated with it. We are going to give it to some, small trusted partner network. They're going to go evaluate their own tools. They're going to evaluate these capabilities. There's been a lot of it's a very kind of dramatic, kind of rollout of a technology. And I think what that has done is it's created this flywheel where it almost incentivizes even more drama and more research and more depth in security being the primary space in a way that we could have already been doing since GPT-4 if we wanted. Like, you can go and deploy these things to go find lots of vulnerabilities. You can use them offensively or defensively. But Mythos kind of created that extra air of seriousnness and uncertainty around it for good reason, because it's an incredibly powerful model. So I go with Occam's razor, which is Amazon obviously has security research teams. They're like any company at that scale. We try and test and push the limits of models in our particular domain of use cases. Clearly, at Amazon scale, you have a very large security team. They're trying to jailbreak models all the time. And so almost by definition, there's already a public-private partnership on all forms of jailbreaking models, trying to push them to the limits. As a part of that, and especially with the surrounding atmosphere of Mythos, I think it would be very natural for Andy to either share that research or his team to share that research, and that escalates, and then that sort of creates its own flywheel. But the idea that there's some kind of boardroom levels, sort of strategy meeting that says we now need to kind of like co-opt the technology, become the only interface to the government. This kind of puts us in the pole position. I think it's less likely that, and more likely this is a situation where the Mythos momentum continued. Fable obviously, had ways of getting back to kind of the Mythos level capability. And researchers, sort of shared that information. And I think there's like a basically, very limited small percentage chance that then Andy and team knew that like the very next event would be they'd stop the model. And that's not even good for Amazon, like strategically. Like, Amazon makes plenty of money the more that Fable gets used in the world. So I don't think you would do some kind of like, kind of maneuvering to create this. So I kind of just go with it's a very chaotic kind of environment right now. The government has, only a few tools at their disposal at any given time to deploy against these things. Those are going to be kind of blunt instruments, and this stuff is coming together very quickly because of, in some cases, the lack of technical capability of the government compared to how powerful these models are. It's like when you see something that seems very scary, like, oh my gosh, the thing could be, we can jailbreak the model and get back to Mythos level capability, and Mythos was the thing we're supposed to be scared about. Then just like stop it. Like that, I think that's like a very natural reaction based on the atmosphere that we've created in AI recently. So I just go with that as the answer.
I mean, I like that you say the atmosphere that we've created
Yeah.
in AI lately.
Everybody but me, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's funny
I didn't
because
create it.
the company on the receiving end of this,
Yeah.
though, is Anthropic. And, you talked about these mythical capabilities. They called the model mythos. They put in the documentation that, like, it broke out of its containment and wrote the engineer while he was having a sandwich in the park.
yes.
Is it that surprising that this is one of the downstream impacts?
Yeah,
of
but
that?
if you put that in your announcement blog post, people might be able to kind of extrapolate and get pretty scared of things. I think it's interesting. So, on the Anthropic front, first of all, I have a huge amount of respect for the entire kind of stack of researchers and policy folks across AI. I happen to have disagreements with some of the categories, but I think there's a deep, let's say, if you imagined a continuum of the most if you kind of had like the most, and I mean this only in like a polite way, it will sound impolite, but like if you're the most doomer on one end of the spectrum, and the most like accelerationist on the other end of the spectrum. Here's kind of the views. The most doomer possible was afraid of like GPT-3, and GPT-3 was gonna sort of accelerate and kind of achieve some kind of unstoppable continual improvement. And the accelerationist says like we need like Fable 20 as soon as possible, right? So that's sort of the continuum. I'm probably maybe 2/3 up to the accelerationist kind of side of things. But if you were on the doomer, and I'm trying to say the polite version of doomer, like you're deep in AI safety, you're very scared of the technology, you think there's as much likelihood of bad things happening as good things happening. We have to win the race and control and kind of stamp down on the technology. We don't want this to be this sort of thing that runs in the wild. If you're in that end of the continuum, the thing that happened this weekend is actually the best case scenario for you. So like you actually want there to be these sort of like valves and buttons in the government that just is like we're just going to stop it.
I mean, that's Dario's position. Do you think he's happy with what's going on?
I won't try and guess any of that. But I will just say, if you had to establish a regulatory regime that said we are going to review models, we're going to push the limits of models, and we're going to have the ability to either roll back access to models or prevent their release in the first place. If we want that to be a regulatory approach, you would need an event like Fable to effectively create the precedent for that environment. You're not going to wait for Congress to vote on this being the new kind of process. You would kind of need something that sort of shocks the system into that kind of regulatory framework. So all I'm saying is that if you were on this end of the continuum, this is actually an outcome that is sort of almost desirable. Now, maybe you would wish that there'd be more technical evaluation, more back and forth. Maybe you wish the policy people were different on the other end. Who knows? But the idea that we now have established that the government can press a button and prevent the rollout of AI is actually like probably a positive update for an entire cohort of people. Now, unfortunately, I don't know that any of your guests represent that cohort, but I think you could easily get some people that would be like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened in AI safety, because now we've created the case law essentially for this. We know the tool exists. And then the next messy process is, when should we use the tool again? What should the real kind of ongoing process look like? But I think that probably, I wish this wasn't the case, but I think practically in the next 3 to 5 years, we probably have to end up in an environment where models do get evaluated by the government. There is a sort of collaborative approach between the government and research and the labs. The government has to kind of green light the release of the model. I think it's probably become either too scary of a technology or too economically powerful of a technology for governments to not want to be in that position. I think that has massive implications when you kind of unpack it, just totally massive implications. One being, other countries now have far more incentive to stand up their own sovereign AI initiatives. So it's actually like maybe net negative for the US economic position in AI that this is the outcome. I think somebody could take the other side and say, no, we'll always have the most powerful models. And so this puts us in the best position because now we can do like horse trading with other countries of, do you want access to our stuff? So I think I like the fact that this is a super interesting debate. And I have like a huge appreciation for every part of the continuum. because I think it's like so intellectually interesting. I still land on the, hey, we probably want to treat this technology more as a substrate technology and then regulate the applied use cases. So we should regulate if you use AI to break into something. We should regulate if you use AI to do bio, research that leads to dangerous things. We shouldn't regulate the model itself. But I totally understand the other views that are on the other end of this, and I think it's kind of very natural with this important of a technology that it has to be somewhat of a democratic process of how we decide to regulate it.
Yeah, you remember there were all those petitions, 6-month pause, and everyone kind of laughed at them?
Yes.
This is effectively the best way to do that type of pause.
Yeah, I mean, this is, if you were in the pause AI movement, this is, again, this is a great outcome. We now have proven how we can pause AI. Now, it's an interesting kind of mechanic that they chose. It's sort of this export control thing. But effectively, if you have an export control where non-US nationals can't use the technology, effectively that's pause AI, because your end API users of these models almost have no way to fully ensure at all times that their end users don't sort of fall into some kind of criteria that's off limits. And
there's already companies that are pulling back. JP Morgan, for instance, has told its Hong Kong users no more Claude.
Right. So now if you really war game this out, 2 to 3, 4 more years out, this is kind of interesting. So we have this sovereign cloud kind of comparison, but cloud, for better or worse, basically became a commodity. Whether you're running in a cloud there's lots of performance implications. Some are faster, some are cheaper, but largely you can get a web server built out wherever you are in the world. You can get storage built out wherever you are in the world. We can build sovereign clouds. Sovereign AI is a different kind of has some intricacies that are different, right? Like intelligence just is not commoditized yet. We don't have everything having the same model capability. So there's lots of really interesting implications, which is, well, what if one country has access to frontier intelligence before the other country? What does that mean geopolitically? What does that mean economically? Obviously now, if you're another country, you have so much commercial incentive to make sure that you can build out labs and have access to frontier intelligence as a kind of hedge against the US. So who's a net winner in that? Probably China. And so what's interesting is you end up, I don't know if, probably most people saw the Dwarkesh Jensen interview, and you can actually, it's a Rorschach test. You can watch that through 2 totally different lenses. You can have one lens, which is Dwarkesh is totally right. We have this huge lead. This stuff is so dangerous, but if we control it, then we're going to control everything. The other lens, which is probably more of the Jensen angle, is actually, these other countries have a lot of incentive to also get this right. And so even if it's a $500 billion problem for them, they just might deploy that much capital on this problem, and they will eventually get it right. And so at the outcome, actually, we haven't gotten any gains as better intelligence from the rest of the world, but what we have lost is our economic superiority in this technology category, because what we've caused is a catalyst for all the other countries to have to build out their own stack. And if they build out their own stack, it's probably going to be, chips from China, models from China, et cetera, which I don't have any reason to be against, other than just I want America to win the economic, angles on this. And so this is sort of this debate that happens on where should you apply export controls and what are the implications of that downstream. And even this week, post Fable, we see that you have models that are certainly not Fable performance level, but Opus 4.7, 4.8 level, which is a big update for a lot of people on what is now possible with open weight models that we just didn't have kind of visibility into before.
Yeah, I think you shared recently that the open weight model or open source models, the capabilities are not that far away from the frontier. And in fact, as these models get smarter, they're almost going to saturate with intelligence, where there's not going to be such a big difference between, let's say, the smartest open source model and the frontier, don't you think? And then so won't this push people to open source?
Well, so the big ongoing conversation, and I think you have some guests that can really represent what they're seeing on the front lines is do you have a sort of fast takeoff scenario of model capability and progress, and with some kind of continual learning, kind of self-improvement dynamic, and then it stands to reason that the company with the most compute or the country with the most compute, and you get the fast takeoff, you get sort of a virtuous flywheel that maybe is sort of has some compounding benefits to it that are just unreachable by anybody else. That's a scenario. Another scenario is that's another just incremental capability. Everybody kind of catches up to it, and you always have this sort of kind of 2 loops going at all times, and with the closed providers and the open providers, and they're kind of always within 3 to 6 months of each other. The world is so different from a market structure standpoint, whether we end up in an outcome where we have sort of an exponential progress in the models that kind of continually learn versus the closed source models, and it's like a 5-year gap in progress, and that just goes again kind of exponential. Totally different market structures. The one that where we have this exponential progress is, again, it's probably actually net positive for America in that case, in which case the export controls probably worked. It means our kind of top 3-4 labs have this incredible superiority. We control access to this technology. That's actually a good scenario, like economically speaking. It might not be like a total net good scenario for society, but it's good for the US. Let's just say that's one scenario. A lot of people are betting that's where we're at with research. The other scenario, and like China sits around and they probably bet on this scenario, is no, we're going to be able to keep up. We're going to throw more compute at the problem. We're going to get more data. We're going to build our own, flywheels, and it's always 3 months out, and kind of behind. And if it's 3 months behind, and it's an open weights provider that has more of a commoditization kind of business model approach, because they just want to, sell more infrastructure or chips, or they just want to reduce our, superiority in the space, which is actually like strategic for China to do. Like everybody wonders like, why are they doing this open weight stuff? It actually makes total sense. Like you're just reducing US's dominance in a field, and it might be worth a couple $100 billion to do that for something that might be worth $10 trillion. So if that keeps up, because there is real economic advantage to doing so, then you have this new kind of sort of dynamic that plays out, which is maybe the layer of incremental value shift is effectively the applied layer of AI. So if you think about it, there's the lab layer and then there's the applied layer.
Like the cursors.
The cursors, the Harveys, the Sierras, the Decagons, the Boxes.
Which is amazing because everyone said they're just a thin wrapper on top of large language models, but now maybe that's where the value comes.
Yeah. So it's one of these things which is like we just have to not be binary about it. Like everything I'm saying, I think the frontier models still make way more money in the future than they do today. Because what happens at the routing layer is you still sort of say, hey, I want Fable or GPT-5, 5 or whatever the next model will be. I want that to be the orchestrator. I need like the super intelligence at the orchestration layer, and I need super intelligence at the review and sort of like fix and check the work of the other agent. And so you have like a barbell, maybe U-shaped model where you use frontier intelligence, but then everything in the middle, you can just say, no, I'm going to take that to Nemotron or Kimi 2.6 or GLM 552 or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like you have super high cost, inference in one part of the workload, super low cost, still pretty good inference in another part of the workload. But who has the incentive to do that? It's the applied layer of AI, because like the business model of the applied layer is obviously like right. Our job is to give you the best model for the job, not just the model from just our lab. So it's cool because we actually now have a good kind of push-pull between frontier labs and the applied layer, where you probably wouldn't want it to be that we're all sort of only in the orbit of one or two companies, commercially and economically. You'd want to make sure that there's some good tension there. And so I think that's kind of the direction things are headed, between kind of the token costs, the open source models becoming so good, and then maybe even some of this regulatory dynamic. I think the applied layer sort of incrementally gets more of that opportunity, which is right. Which is obviously great. So
you've talked about open source and you've just mentioned China. But what can you tell us about La Chaton Fat?
It's great memes.
So folks, La Chaton Fat is a rumored open source model from Mistral and has been the subject of great fascination from the internet, wouldn't you say?
There's great comedy.
John, Dan, can we show people what we're talking about? Let's roll image A. This is La Chaton Fat.
The #1 model from Europe, yes.
My French,
or the world.
My French, rudimentary French, it translates to the very fat kitten. Can we roll B? This is a standard day in Paris now. Yeah. But it does show something, that there's so much eagerness for AI that there's now fan art for this potential model from Mistral.
We've reached a really important sort of phase in the cycle. I do think that it is kind of cool, because some of the things that you maybe discounted the importance of, all of a sudden just like have so much more importance. I'm watching I don't know if folks are watching the fireworks Base 10 space as an example, like it's pretty cool that we now have these open weights models that you can effectively post-train on your particular domain of task, and you can go and eke out another 5 or 10 points of performance on these types of models. And again, that's only possible because of the Mistrals, because of the Chinese kind of open weights models. And the cost curve has gone down so much that there are actually some situations which is, actually maybe I should train a model just for my use case, because it's literally like economically now, it's not even like I want control, it's actually economically advantageous for you to do so.
So is this the answer to the big token maxing hype where everyone's spending all this money on tokens and not really understanding where they're going or whether there's an ROI that...
Yeah, I mean, I think that in practice, that phase probably lasted 2.5 weeks. Like from the moment that Meta token maxed. Are you saying
the media overhyped token maxing?
No, I would never claim that. We should go through your various podcast headlines, but
we're not going to do that. Okay. We got the cat pictures and that's it. Yeah.
No, but I mean, if I had to capture the cycle of the first token maxing, Meta has a leaderboard, uses the most tokens possible, to now, the last weeks of rumors of we're shutting down everything, no one can use AI. It's about a 2-month period. So it's, people need to probably, always kind of step back and just be okay, is what we're doing a pragmatic, thing for work, or are we just sort of getting kind of hyped up too crazily on something? What's interesting is this phase was so short that I don't ever think it reached outside of the tech industry. We kind of host these CIO dinners in every city that we go to, and we had a dinner within 3 days of the token maxing initial spike on Google Trends, the word finally emerged, and 3 people had heard about it. And so I feel confident that it'll have died.
They haven't heard about it because their employees are out spending the tokens.
Yeah, fair point. So, but hopefully it will have completely died by the time it reaches the rest of the world, and then we can just move to more normal environments. But the thing that is true of the phenomenon is that these agents are just using hundreds of times more tokens than they were before. And so, when we launched our first kind of AI use case within Box, our product, the average number of tokens that was being used on a task was 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 tokens. Now our latest agents might use 1 million tokens or 5 million tokens on executing a task. And so that's in some cases that's a 100x increase in number of tokens. And the reason for that is obviously what's happening is right as we solve one use case, when you would think that we can drive down the cost curve of that one use case, all of a sudden a model capability allows us to now add another use case that's much harder, and then our appetite just grows to solve harder and harder and harder problems. And so it's this funny thing because people get confused. They say, "I thought AI was supposed to be getting cheaper," and it's yes, you can actually think about it as cheaper if you looked at the unit of intelligence. The reason it's more expensive is because we're now taking on bigger tasks, and so we're getting confused because we're why is this the one tech trend that doesn't have sort of the Moore's law phenomenon? And it's because actually no, we're outrunning the efficiency improvements in our appetite for what these models can go and do. And so it's actually what you need to do is have a way to normalize the cost of the tokens to the tasks that you can now deploy. And then if you look at that, then that starts to look cheaper on a per task basis. It's just again our tasks are getting bigger, or more accurate, or more effective, and that's going to happen for quite some time.
The reason why token maxing took off as a concept is because people saw the exponential revenue, right? The fact that Anthropic and OpenAI were at 0 2023, now they're going to do $50 billion this year at the very least. And so people are looking for an explanation. And either the answer is this is real, or it's somehow inflated, and that's why people go to token maxing. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is all this spend is much more legit than some of the online discussion makes it out to be.
Well, I think if I had to officially provide my own takeaway for my own point, it would be it would sort of be there's sort of always this experimentation phase of a new technology. And this happens to be a relatively expensive technology, so thus the experimentation phase is expensive. And then what will happen is enterprises will deploy AI, and then they'll sort of peel off. They'll start to see like where are the real use cases, where are the ones that aren't as real. They'll wind down the ones that aren't as real. The ones that are real, they'll then look at it and they'll say, is there a way to do it at a lower cost once we understand it enough? Or do we still need the frontier intelligence for everything we're doing? And that's actually just like a pretty normal, I think, process that everybody's going through right now. But you know, I think about it like our engineering team. We are not token maxers in the sense of like there's no leaderboard. We're not incentivizing overuse of tokens. We're just saying use it as effectively as possible to get your work done faster. And our growth rate of spend is exponential. And we're like totally happy about it. Like nobody internally is, other than like, we got to like shift some things around and make sure we plan for this even more next year. Like that's obviously a stressful conversation, but we're not stressed about the idea that we're spending on AI. Like we're quite excited about the productivity gains that we get. And so I think what's happening is every enterprise is having to kind of go through their own journey on that. Like they're deploying it in some teams, and some teams are saying, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest thing of all time. And then other teams, you kind of look at what they're doing, and you can't see any kind of measurable improvement in the output of that organization. And so then you're like, okay, you know, like maybe it's not as effective there. But I would say like, I think it's very easy to kind of capture one or two anecdotes and then kind of over extrapolate on the overall themes. I would say the vast majority of the current agentic spend that's happening is sustainable because partly because it's actually coming mostly from engineering and engineering related tasks, and this is an audience that is kind of technically capable of you know determining whether they like the work product that's coming out of the AI. Maybe as it gets to other parts of knowledge work, you know, those people will not be as sort of familiar with how to do the ROI measurement, and then it'll get even messier. But like so far, I think it's actually been largely, totally reasonable.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left. Let's do a small lightning round.
Oh, no.
So my first take here is that Siri is really good. It's going to be really good now.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I agree. What?
Elaborate.
Oh. Is it lightning round or is it you
like,
want to hear a 5-minute answer round?
You give like a 60-second answer.
Oh, I mean, what could be easier than pressing a button on your phone and talking to it? And if you, at least based on the announcement, they've taken Gemini, which is a very good model, and been able to, I don't know if it's fork or distill or something within there, is sort of Gemini grade intelligence. So if you get Gemini grade intelligence and voice on your phone, press a button, I think you're just going to use that for a lot of things. And then, I think the exciting thing is like, imagine that hooked up to various apps on your phone. And you're like, hey, order this thing for me, or, go and add this calendar entry. Like, I think those are very plausible daily use cases that we will have. And it's exactly the sweet spot for Apple to kind of own that space.
Yeah, no, I think Apple did it finally. That was good. That was a good time.
Are you going to tell me if my answer is right at the end of each one? Okay.
This is how it works
good.
here.
Okay. So we agree, 1 for 1. Okay.
All right, how about this one? Permanent underclass.
I don't like this one. This one I don't like at all. Not only do I disagree with it, but I think it's just like a bad meme to have in the atmosphere. I think it's like not good for college students coming into the workforce, of having so much stress about what company to join and what's gonna kind of play out. I do think companies actually do the job market a disservice though by not being as clear on their own philosophies on this, which some of it is reasonable because it's like, oh man, we're getting thrown through a loop. There's so much innovation, but I do think that companies like need to be somewhat clear on, hey, here's how we want to use AI. We want to use AI to accelerate our work, or accelerate our technical innovation, or accelerate our ability to hit customers, versus no, we're actually like, our metric is as few employees as possible, with AI. Like you kind of do want to, be able to have some stance. And I think companies have been very confused, and that lets this meme somewhat persist, for the internet.
Okay, I won't rate that one.
Thank you.
All right, last one is the SpaceX performance good or bad news for OpenAI and Anthropic?
Oh, well, it's obviously good news.
You don't think Elon took some of their money because he pitched the market on an AI company, and that's where the money got funneled into?
I'm not sure I've seen like a limit of appetite of
That's true.
Of if I mean, there's a literal limit of money in the world, but I don't know that is zero sum at this stage. So I think people are pretty clear that if the revenue of this entire category of the frontier models and the infrastructure stack is measured in the trillions, then you can have 20 companies that all take a piece of that at different layers of the stack. So I'm not sure I would be convinced that would be zero sum.
Did you buy SpaceX?
I actually did.
Okay.
Not I don't know if I'm embarrassed or not, but I'm not going to say the amount of shares, but I wanted to be a part of the movement. So I'm on Robinhood, buying my retail shares of SpaceX. I'm up like $15 now per share. But so I'm happy. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Aaron, you answered my email when we were just at the very start of this podcast, 4 episodes in. Came on the show. I feel like every single time we talk, something crazy is happening.
That's a guarantee at this point. So,
boy, are we in the thick of it, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Good to see
Sir,
you.
thank you so much. Aaron, thank you, everybody. Cheers. So, AI infrastructure, right? We're in the middle of the greatest infrastructure build out of all time, bigger than cable, bigger than the railroads. We're going to see $700 billion in capital expenditures this year. And that means that some of the biggest questions that we have about this AI moment are actually things that we can find out from the infrastructure discussion alone. Questions like, are we overbuilding? Will these data centers that are announced ever get stood up? And of course, will all this added compute actually lead to better AI models, or is it misguided? And so to have this discussion, we're going to speak with 3 of the best AI infrastructure reporters in the world, Anissa Gardizzi from The Information, Max Cherney from Reuters, and Lauren Good of Wired. Let's give it up for Max, Anissa, and Lauren. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey. Hi, everyone.
So let's start here. There have been headlines that of the announced AI data centers that are supposed to come up, something like 50% of them are actually being built. Is that the case? And if so, why? Anissa, do you want to lead us off?
Sure, I totally believe that statistic, and I think it might actually be higher if you include announcements. Because of all the planned data centers that are underway, I think it's highly likely that many will be delayed due to higher costs, how hard it is to get labor. But then the number that I'm keeping close track of is announced projects versus actually projects that are being built. And I think we've seen some pretty crazy announcements from companies like OpenAI with all of these different 10 gigawatt, 6 gigawatt projects. And those are numbers that I'm paying a lot of attention to because I think we need to sort of back into them and say, okay, if you wanted 10 gigawatts by this date, how many do you have today? Was that a real commitment? How firm is that commitment? But on projects that are actually getting built, I do think 50% not really getting done on time is what I would expect.
Wait, what percentage would you say have been announced but not included in that 50% number?
When I think of that number, it's quite high. Like even if you think of OpenAI, for example, announcing a 10 gigawatt project, we're not going to see 10 gigawatts in the next couple of years, or they're going to sort of spread out that bet. And I think that's a really good area for reporters to look at is if you just back into announcements, it's a really good way to say, hey, this project is not on track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because if you look at the way that stocks have been traded publicly, a lot of the market action that we're seeing is entirely dependent on those announcements coming true. Mm-hmm. So Max, let's go to you. What are the consequences going to be if these announced build-outs don't materialize?
Well, I think there's a lot of shareholders of these public companies that are going to be pretty frustrated. Microsoft, Amazon, et cetera, have been making big CapEx bets, as I think everybody in this room knows. They've been going to the market to get debt now, which is, I think shareholders would be pretty interested. In terms of the consequences, though, I'm a chip reporter, so that's sort of that's how I kind of think about it. And it's very likely, I would say, that we're going to see some overcapacity, essentially. So like people are building, especially memory companies are building tons of factories right now. And typically the chip industry is, again, I'm sure everybody in this room knows, tends to be cyclical. So the whiplash from this one might be pretty bad, depending on exactly when it comes to an end, if it does.
I think what Max is saying is that it's good for his job security because the more news there is, the more he'll have to report on. Yeah.
Oh, you guys are not going to get a break anytime soon.
No, not at all.
No, I can't. I'm very curious if the if there is a bust, what that looks like exactly and what precipitates it. I think it'll be a lot of fun to cover.
Well, one of the big questions.
Fun. I also think, if I can say too,
Yeah.
I think this is a particularly unique time because not only do we have these incredibly highly valued, ambitious frontier labs that are getting involved in these circular deals, but also we're in the middle of a memory shortage. There's this unrelenting demand for compute, and also this is a midterm election year. And so I think you're going to see a lot of politicizing of the data centers too, as sort of lawmakers try to appeal to their base, because a lot of people are very unhappy about data centers.
Yep, I mean, they're not polling well at all.
No.
So, when you think about where the collapse might happen, a popular thing for people to discuss is, well, maybe NVIDIA, which has been making such premiums on its hardware, it can't sustain it or it gets caught. So, Lauren, you've spent a lot of time with Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. What do you think about Jensen would enable him to sustain NVIDIA's lead? Or do you think that some of these skeptics have a point?
Yes and yes. I think some of the skeptics absolutely have a point, and I think once you reach the sort of is it the zenith? Is there the nadir?
That
I always
works.
get those two confused.
Yeah.
That NVIDIA has. People are always sort of looking to take you down a peg and compete, but I think NVIDIA and Jensen has been incredibly good in NVIDIA's history at sort of pivoting the company at exactly the moment that they need to in order to make sure that they've sort of caught the next wave. And we certainly saw that happen with not only the GPU to begin with and parallel processing, but then again with sort of pivoting towards crypto, which ultimately meant they were in a good place for AI. And now we see the company doing that by addressing the inference market a lot more closely too. And Jensen coming out and making these big proclamations that actually they're the biggest CPU maker in the world, which I know Intel and AMD must be thrilled about. So, I think he's very smart and very strategic, and that there's a good chance that they do maintain their dominance.
Now, you had
I
a-
think the question is
Yeah.
how much of the inference market they're going to get. I mean, it's whether it's 80% or 40% or somewhere in between or 90%. I mean, I think that's what everybody's fighting out at the moment. I don't think there's a question that they're going to have some big chunk of it. It's just how much,
Yeah, I'm going to go to Anissa in a moment, but Lauren, I just want you to tell us a little bit of what it was like with Jensen on a cover shoot for Wired.
You're talking about when I brushed his hair.
That would be it.
Yeah. Okay. So
Wait, you actually? No.
I really did. Oh. Yeah. I'll be lining up later to brush people's hair if anyone would like to. So I did a cover story on Jensen for Wired a couple years ago, and our Wired art department is world class, by the way. And so we had this big photo shoot set up, and I asked if I could tag along to the photo shoot because I just wanted 15 more minutes with him to ask him some follow-up questions about Blackwell. And so they let me tag along down to the office in Santa Clara, set up this whole set for Jensen, who had exactly 2 minutes to give us. And as the photographer was looking at Jensen under the bright lights, the photographer said, "Oh, he's got some flyaways," and that gorgeous silver hair that he has. And then he said, "Does anyone have a brush?" Silence across the set. No one at NVIDIA apparently had a brush. I was like, okay. And as anyone who has long hair knows, you always have a brush. So I said, well, I have a brush. So then I went to my backpack and got the brush. And then I said, okay, here's the brush. And no one moved. And meanwhile, Jensen is like, what are we doing here, folks? And I said, oh, okay. So I walked up to Jensen and I took out my brush and I got really close to him. And I said, Jensen, we're about to get a lot more close. And he said, oh, Christ. And then I brushed his hair. And I have to say, I did bring some evidence of this. I think it looks great, frankly. Oh, wow. I think it turned out really well. So, yeah. Now, the unfortunate conclusion to this story, very quickly, because I know we need to move on, is that people were joking afterwards, the net worth of every individual strand of hair on that brush, right? Like you could sell this on eBay, which I was obviously not going to do as an ethical journalist. But then, several months later, my backpack was it was my gym bag. It was in the back of my car, and downtown San Francisco. I think you know where this is going. My car got broken into, and the brush got stolen. So those thieves have no idea the value of what they got away with.
They are cloning Jensen
Yes.
as we speak.
Yes, I'll see you in the back afterwards if you want your. hairbrushed.
Anissa, can you talk to us a little bit about what we've kind of hinted at this point, that there's this, NVIDIA, the common perception on NVIDIA is their GPUs were great for training, but you can actually do the inference or the act of using a model on a variety of different chips. And once these labs train their models and they're happy with their models, most of the computing is going to go to these inference chips. And therefore, even if NVIDIA has a bet there, they're not going to be able to sustain their dominance. Is that, what do you think about that? Is that a potential flaw in the armor for NVIDIA?
I think it is a flaw. And I think if anyone's going to sort of attack NVIDIA's dominance, they're going to do it on inference, like you said. And there is sort of a massive effort underway right now to make all inference chips under the sun work well. And so every single company that buys NVIDIA chips and is spending a lot of money on NVIDIA chips is trying really hard to make these other chips work, whether it's in-house chips from Google or Amazon, or even in OpenAI's case and potentially Anthropic's case, do we make our own inference chip? So I'd have a hard time, believing that none of those chips are going to pan out, but they might not tackle the bulk of the inference workload. But then again, even if they do 10% of your inference, maybe you're saving enough money that you think the effort is worth it, and it gives you negotiating leverage with NVIDIA. If they know that you have an in-house chip team, Jensen's going to be a little bit worried when negotiating with you when you're playing hardball with him. So I think everyone's going to have an inference chip answer to NVIDIA. But when I talk to data center companies about what they're seeing, some data center companies don't really care what chip goes inside of their data center, but they try to get hints from the companies that they're working with. On the data center side, they're seeing a lot of NVIDIA. And in the instances that I'm seeing where there are non-NVIDIA chips, it's because of some sort of financial backstop. So I do wonder how long that will have to keep being the case, because that will definitely hinder non-NVIDIA chips if they need special financing arrangements to get inside the data center.
Am I wrong in thinking the AI world is sort of separating on two poles? There's the NVIDIA, OpenAI pole, and the Anthropic, Google, Amazon pole, right? So it's almost two separate ecosystems competing with each other?
I think OpenAI is investing a lot in non-NVIDIA hardware.
Are they trying to move away from NVIDIA?
Yeah, they are. They're using chips from other companies. Cerebras is a good example, and they have their own in-house chip. So I think maybe publicly they're doing some big announcements with NVIDIA, and I believe it's 5 gigawatts they have to deploy in the next couple of years on Vera Rubin. That's a lot, and that in itself might hinder them from doing more. But I think Sam Altman wants to diversify from NVIDIA.
Why?
Because, just like any other company, it's so expensive, and they have their own in-house silicon effort. I don't think they think that they know their model better than anyone else, like their AI model. And so I think they think that they're the best to develop a chip that can run their model efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Max, you're back and forth to Taiwan very frequently. When we think about the position of Taiwan and Taiwan Semiconductor in this world, the fact that it's in this tenuous geopolitical place is something people tend to be like, oh, okay, and then move on right away. And I want to hear your perspective on whether the independence of Taiwan and the stability of TSMC is this hidden black swan event that's just kind of in plain sight that people are not paying enough attention to.
I mean, it is. For some reason, the modern world decided to put all of our chip manufacturing, or most of it, next to Kim Jong-un, and the rest of it is in China, is in Taiwan. I don't really understand who decided that or why we decided that, but that's the nature of the beast. Chip companies, the design companies in the U.S. do not plan for this. The contingency plan, is something along the lines of well, we're all kind of screwed if China invades, which. Okay, but there's no real plan there. And when I say invades, I don't necessarily mean a literal invasion. I think what's a lot more likely is some kind of soft power exchange, like what happened in Hong Kong over time. I think realistically, that's a more likely option, although I'm not saying Xi Jinping won't just invade. He absolutely will, and he said he would, which could be catastrophic for TSMC and the modern world again. I do know that chip companies, as I said, there really isn't much planning and much consideration of it, because I think people in the industry just think it's an event that's just so crazy, complicated, and out of this world that nobody's going to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Max, do you want to talk about what happens when you try to visit TSMC?
They send me to the gift shop. So
You're in Taipei, and that's where you go.
that's basically it. They got a museum where they have like I don't know, a bunch of chips that they've made over the years. One of the Cerebrus chips is in there. They're very proud of it, the dinner plate size one. And I've never been to the museum, but that's where they that's where they always want to take me. I think Wired is one of the few organizations, news outlets, that's actually been able to go inside of one of the factories, and they wrote an interesting story about it. But yeah, I do not get to go to the TSMC fabs, unfortunately. They're not all that interesting inside. Like, they're cool if you've never seen one, but they mostly look the same. It's like a bunch of white boxes with robots moving around. So it's not like people that know what they're looking for. It's helpful because you can like count the number of EUV machines in there and figure out roughly how many chips they can make and like do that kind of thing and figure out what kind of tools they're using. But if the tours that most chip companies give are not particularly enlightening in general.
Yeah,
They are fascinating, though.
Yeah, they're cool, but
Yeah.
they're not useful.
Yeah.
In like a meaningful reporting sense or an investor's, from an investor's perspective or something like that.
I had gotten very excited about TSMC, did a ton of reporting, spoke with former employees there, and then got the courage up, and I called them and I said, I'm ready to come to Taiwan. And they're like, you can come to the gift shop. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not coming then.
My understanding is that our
Yeah.
freelancer who got in there spent about a year negotiating with their
wow.
PR team to get in.
So-
yeah.
I've been working on it for three. So
Yeah.
if she has any tips,
Yeah.
like I could definitely
Call
use
up
them.
Virginia Heffernan.
I
I'm sure
will,
she'd chat with you.
absolutely.
Lauren, you've been inside a fab in Arizona. What's it like?
Yeah, well, this was the Intel Fab 52, which is their most advanced fab. It's a 2-nanometer fab, and it is on the level of what TSMC does in terms of 2-nanometer, but of course at a fraction of the scale of what TSMC does. And to Max's point about, well, what is our redundancy or our resiliency plan in the event of an invasion of Taiwan? It seems like right now the U.S. government is very interested in what Intel can do in its fabs, but it's pretty small. And so, yeah, I went to Chandler, Arizona, saw Fab 52, got the bunny suit on. And like Max said, it's interesting to see everything is roboticized. It's like if you had this utopian fever dream of what the future of manufacturing looked like, and everything was white, and everyone was dressed in all white, and everything's like moving around. They call them FOUPs that actually carry the silicon around above head, and then they just sort of automatically go down to get like etched and carved and stamped and everything. It feels and looks like science fiction, but from a reporting perspective, oftentimes the companies will cover up the names of the vendors on the different machines, and you may be able to get some insight. For example, there were ASML UEV machines in these giant bays the size of school buses, but then you might see some spaces where they're like, well, we have 2 more coming and we're waiting for them. And so you're like, okay, what does that mean? UEV is obviously a very, a very coveted sort of technology, and it's also very expensive, and so you get some insights from that, but primarily it's just kind of it's good for context, for better understanding how this all works.
Right.
I was not allowed to go to this tour, just for what it's worth.
Max, I think you're doing something wrong.
Max, you got to work on your emails. So there
Just
was.
kidding. That means you're doing actually a great job.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
There was an interesting moment in the Dwarkesh Jensen interview, which I guess will come up in every session today, where basically what Jensen is trying to get across to Dwarkesh is if you do not provide chips to China, there's going to be a constraint. They will develop their own models on their own chips. They could become the global standards and then put export controls on the U.S. Does anybody here think that is a legitimate concern, or do you think Jensen just wants to sell chips in China?
Wants to sell chips in China.
Okay.
I mean, it might be a legitimate concern in some sense, but NVIDIA has run out of places to grow. They can't sell to any more countries. They can't sell to any more hyperscalers. They can't sell to any more, even they're going after the enterprise market, which is messy and complicated and difficult to actually make a lot of money in. So China is a big market that has basically no access to NVIDIA chips right now. I mean, if you're getting those kinds of gross margins, like, yeah, of course, that's like an obvious, just a very obvious place to be able to sell chips. The company's kind of obsessed with it at the moment. Mm-hmm. And it's why Jensen goes to Washington all the time. That's why he insisted on going to China. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me.
Mm-hmm. Anissa, any thoughts?
Max spends a little bit more time thinking about that than I do. Mm-hmm. I do understand, obviously he wants to sell to China. It's a huge market and they're taking a hit because they can't sell to China. So you can't really answer the question without acknowledging that. But But I do think that, from the national security perspective, Chinese companies are developing AI chips no matter what happens. So, whether we can or can't, I do think that they'll continue to develop alternatives to NVIDIA.
I mean, their manufacturing process is a lot worse. Like one of the research firms just published an analysis of the sort of one of the new Chinese chips, like homemade by SMIC, and it's good, but they run up to the limit of like they can't buy EUV machines, the big ones that Lauren was just talking about. So if you can't buy those things, it's just fundamentally difficult to make transistors below a certain size, and they can't do it effectively.
Yeah. And to Max's point, NVIDIA only has so much more room to grow. I mean, they're at the point where they have become a major investor in CoreWeave, and then CoreWeave is using that money to buy NVIDIA chips. And so it's real. And there was an earnings call earlier this year, maybe late last year, where NVIDIA said that they had a domestic buyer of some of the chips that they weren't able to sell to China, though they does not disclose the buyer. And so they're at the point where they're basically, trying to sell them wherever they can. And so you have to imagine the motivation there is just they want to sell chips to China.
Those leftover H20s that they were, that were blocked from sales to China, that somebody else wanted them because people want silicon right now so badly.
Right.
Any kind will do.
I think they sold about, was it $600 million worth of those? Yeah.
Okay, so a minute left. Let's do this in actual lightning round, so yes or no. Do you think that, are you all bit or lesson pilled? Which is basically like the reason why there's all this infrastructure is because the AI labs think the more GPUs and chips you string together, the better the models will get. Do you think that it will continue to improve as these build-outs continue to explode in size, or no?
Wait, ask the question once more.
Is the investment worth it in these data centers, or are they ultimately not going to have much better models, even though they have a lot more chips?
Are we going down the line here?
You asked, so you
can
go
start
now.
with me. Generally, yes.
Okay. Max?
Not sure. Sorry.
Okay.
I think it depends on the amortization, what ends up happening there.
Okay. Anissa, you announced your news on Twitter, right?
I did, and LinkedIn.
Why don't you tell everybody where you're going next?
July 6th, I'm starting a new job at the Wall Street Journal.
All right, let's hear for Anissa.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And thank you, Lauren and Max, for joining us as well. Let's hear it for them, the whole panel.
Thank you so
guys.
much, Alex.
Thank you very much. So often the story of AI's trajectory is told without the people using it. We hear about these concepts called token maxing that are talked about in the abstract, and then one day you see a chart, and you never actually speak to the people spending the tokens. So I think to fully understand how this technology is progressing and its potential to meet the way that people want it to go, we actually have to speak with the people who are building with the tokens. And that's why I'm thrilled to bring on Dallas Dolan, the TMT leader at PwC, who is actually implementing this AI, looking at the costs and making sure that it's worth the money that they're spending on it, and will take us deep into the token maxing and the budgeting conversation. So folks, let's give it up for Dallas Dolan of PwC. Great to see you, Dallas.
The tables have turned. You're interviewing me. This is good.
What do you think about, Aaron Levy was here like 10 minutes ago, and he talked about how token maxing was a BS media narrative, effectively, and it never really happened. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if I totally agree with it. We were actually talking backstage just before he came on, and I think there's absolutely, like, we'll call it above the plane sort of commentary that's out there that we're all seeing in both the mainstream media as well as like what plays really well on social media, on X and other places, and in podcasts. And then there's the reality within a lot of organizations, but it's happening enough where the behaviors, I'll call them, are slightly problematic from a cost and from an ROI point of view, that it's real, right? You can't say that every circumstance is a problem necessarily, but it's coming through in a way that, it's enough to think about and say, hey, are we doing this the right way, right? Broadly speaking, from an enterprise strategy, and also then from even a broader ecosystem point of view.
Yeah, so there's this moment now where we're seeing actually a counter to token maxing. It's called token minimizing. And you're seeing companies like AT&T and Meta get really serious about cost. We also know that Uber, of course, spent their entire budget in less than half a year. Who do you think is going to win out at the end of the day, the token minimizers or the token maxers, given the definition of token maxing you just gave us?
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the good news. The good news is I don't think there's a winner and loser that's going to be defined by did you token max or not token max. I think the winner and loser is going to be defined by did you outcome max or not. It's in part going to be a function of how did you incentivize people, which goes into that leaderboard and the things that got a lot of folks will say in trouble or certainly in the news, right? So there's that piece of it. It's the how do you actually want to encourage people to do it without encouraging the wrong things. It's take it too far, et cetera, right? So there's that piece, or spend too much money. And then the other part of it is going to be actually, I think from a planning point of view within an organization, and I deal with this as well. So I sit on the boards for our US and our global organization at PwC, and we talk about this a lot. In fact, we talk about this even contextually from a comparative point of view within different industries. So it's not just saying, hey, does one organization as a services company spend more or less than another, but also how are we compared in spending, against, let's say, like a tech company who's, got a bunch of engineers and doing the coding there. And I think what we're looking for is, what's like the baseline, right? So it's benchmarking with industry, within the industry, outside the industry, and against a given benchmark, and saying, okay, are we actually getting an ROI? Are we way outside the bounds in terms of what we think the spend is or what we know the spend is, right? Some of the companies that you named are certainly companies that we're aware of and work with too. So we have some decent intel on what's happening within the industry from that point of view. But it is going to be that, like, what outcomes did you get? And I will tell you, I've seen some things that people have built, for example, in the deal space, that's just incredible. Like really, really amazing output, taking, thousands of hours worth of work and creating a product within 7 minutes. Cost is very high, but it's an amazing output, and it does show very well from a consumer or from a customer point of view. It's also very exciting for the folks who work in the industry who don't have to stay up all night, maybe working on something. That's great. There's other processes that people haven't even attacked yet, and I think the question is, when do you actually go after each one of those and say, how am I going to outcome maximize for each one of these processes? That's actually when you're going to see, I think, the benefits come through. There will be maximization of spend, but it'll be maximized in a way that you're actually getting an outcome from it, not just because you spent the most money.
So you're already doing ROI calculations?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're probably far ahead than most folks. How do you determine the ROI, and what percentage of your projects would you say are actually generating a positive ROI?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I know, even from an external point of view, I think MIT did a recent publication talking about like what sort of activities are really replaceable just with generative AI in general, especially like in the vision and human interactive space. And I think they came up with an outcome of about 23%, as in you wouldn't use a human to do 23% of the work. I look at that and say, in our business, it's probably not as high as 23%, but it's going to be some percentage of every single thing that people do, right? So it's a different mathematical equation. It is absolutely going to be measured for our business. It's going to be measured in hours. The same thing that's going to be done in the engineering space for a lot of these companies as well. It's a measurement of hours. It's, are you making the person more efficient? Are they creating more output? For the amount of time that they're spending on it, right? So is that lines of code they're producing, or is it quality product? Which this is an interesting thing, right? Like, I could build a larger slide deck, or I can write way more lines of code, let's say, but am I actually getting a product at the end of the day that people are saying, oh yeah, that's something I'm willing to use? And I had that conversation a bunch actually at Tech Week in New York a couple of weeks ago with a number of founders and also a number of the investors, right, from Andreessen and others, who were talking about the types of companies that they're investing in. I think it's really interesting, right? If you're an investor, you say, no, like, what does your product do, for the person who's using it, especially if it's a coding product or something along those lines. If you're not indicating that you're able to help them actually build a product, right, come out with something, a product or service that's better, that their customer's going to want to use, the fact that it produces more lines of code or a longer slide deck or a longer pitch deck or a longer memo is not better, right? And I think we're going to come to a determination, Alex, really soon here, where we start to say, oh, wait a second, well, like, what am I really trying to get to here? Is it more, or is it actually a better product that I'm trying to get?
Right, but that sort of goes to the way that the foundational labs and the cloud players are working with you. The things that I've heard is that these companies are making it so that when you plug into their systems, you're going to spend a lot of tokens, and they don't really want you to be able to measure them. Are you finding that?
So I think the big counter to maybe the marketing and sales approach there is in the control plane that's being used to actually help companies make decisions on what models being used or what interface is being used to do specific activities. And this is where this concept of central planning, and I say that as someone who's traveling to China next week, this concept of centralized planning within an enterprise is going to be so important. It's you are not allowed to check the weather five times a day using, Claude 5.7 or whatever it might be, right? Like it's unacceptable, right?
would be in
Mythos
trouble
is
if-
not a good use case for weather checking. Even if you're worried like I was last night about the tornadoes going through the Midwest and trying to get back here so I wasn't late for Alex. It's still not a good use, right? You can do that still with the weather app, or if you really want to use something inexpensive, like there's a lot of those options out there. I think what's going to happen, the term control plane is sort of out there. It's relatively new-ish. It's got governance elements. It's got cost control elements. It's got access to data elements. It's got, let's see, even like the human interaction elements, like what can you put into it, not only what you can get out of it. That is going to be the surface of play, so to say, where people are going to spend a lot of the time and the energy at the AT&Ts and the Metas and the services companies and a lot of these other spaces, including in the engineering space, but also in the sales and marketing and in the back office as well, as they look at other activities that they will do better, but they will do better with the right tool. A quick analogy, right? Like the fact of the matter is we are simply not best suited driving the Lamborghini to go pick up milk. Those two things just don't align, right? Unless you live in South Beach, in which case it's totally okay. But those are the crypto people; they're not here. So, but in this case, like that's not what we'd want to encourage. And I think that should eventually proliferate and get to everywhere, especially as the costs have gone up. And the last time we got together a few months ago was right at that click point of cost, and that you did a great thing with the audience talking about, hey, how much are people willing to spend? Which is a super fun exercise, which I hope maybe you'll do later.
We could do it now. Can we
wanna do it now? Okay.
Let's put the house lights up for a second.
Ooh, here we go.
I am curious. Sorry, we're going to ask you to vote. Of the folks here, would you be willing to spend double the amount that you're spending today for the current capabilities that you have with AI? That's it? How many people are satisfied with the price that you're paying? So if they okay, sorry, I'm going to go with more questions. If let's say your Claude subscription doubled in price, how many people would cancel? Is it Fable or well, right now, no.
Currently,
Fable.
no.
Yeah. I think okay, we can put the lights down again. I think basically what it proves is we saw about half the rooms hands go up that they would pay double, and it does seem like there's a bunch of room for the labs to be able to raise prices and still do well. But Dallas, something interesting happened since we spoke last. So we spoke at Google Cloud Next about this, and someone asked about the margin. I think Dallas, you asked whether the margin of the business can be maintained at the current prices. And I thought, okay, well, forget about it, because these labs have such an economically valuable tool for us that they'll raise prices. But we might be in the moment where they're going to get into a price war, because OpenAI is rumored to be potentially dropping prices.
Yep.
And so what do you think about that?
I think we're absolutely right on the precipice of that. I think you actually saw in the audience here, by comparison, we saw every hand go up when you said, would you be willing to pay double when we were together 3 months ago in April. And when Alex asked if people were willing to pay 4 and 5 times as much, there was still a quarter of the hands in the room that were up. And we're talking a room of about 200 people roughly, right? So there was a lot of people. It was a good T sample, so to say. I contrast that to what we just saw right now, and I think it's a fairly even distribution, similar subset of people. And the reality is there's more skepticism of value that they're getting from it, especially when you start layering on the access and the capabilities associated with some of the models that are still per seat, as well as some of the open models, which you can get access to, and for free, you can do a lot of really cool things.
What would you do if the models were half price or tokens were half price?
Would I do something differently? Is that the question?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm like OpenAI or Google, and I come to you and say, Dallas, we're happy that you're using our technology. We want to make sure that you don't use Fable when it's back online. So we're cutting your prices by 50%.
Yeah.
Would it change anything you're doing?
Absolutely. I think actually, I know this because I talked to my CEO and CIO yesterday and my CIO again this morning. And we are in a price-sensitive environment, right? We have 350,000 people globally. They all have access to one tool or another. And so when you have 350,000 people and they're playing with tools, there's a high degree of price sensitivity just on sheer volume alone, right? Even if not all of them are doing super productive things, just to be clear, those aren't all engineers, but they're all pretty smart people doing pretty interesting things. And they have use cases that they're like, hey, I want to play with this, and we are encouraging them to do that. We think that's great. but we're also price sensitive, right? There's an elasticity there that says the higher the price goes up, the less we'd want them to use that model. We'd want them to use something cheaper. So if somebody was coming to us with a cheaper model, 100% the direction of travel would go, to that. And we've even built that into some of our control plane technology. So there's selectivity of model, and there's also recommendations within it as well. So depending on who you are and what it is that we think you're going to do with it, it automatically configures to have a specific model, and you have to break the initial setting in order to use something different. So we're already there, but I'm certain we would encourage more usage of cheaper things. There's no doubt.
Have you gotten any of those type of calls yet, or are you waiting for them?
I won't go too far into it, but there's definitely conversations going right now. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
When we spoke recently, you told me that you're seeing some limits with agents. And it seems to me like if we're going to see this continue, agents can't be limited. They have to be able to operate autonomously and spend all those tokens and be effective. So what are the limits that you're seeing with agents today? And do you think that, if we could extrapolate a little bit, it means that we're going to see some more speed bumps as the labs try to roll this technology out further?
Yeah, use the term limit. I think it's a function of both risk tolerance as well as cost tolerances, and then finally, what is it you have an expectations of these things doing on their own. And so the limitations are actually in all three of those areas that are coming through. From a risk tolerance point of view, I think people are saying, wait a second, I'm worried that the agent without some level of, call it control or governance around it, it could go just about anywhere. And what does that mean within my organization, depending on what access I give to it from a data perspective? I would say from client data, or whether it's, it's code itself, and what can it do to change code? If you ask it to do one thing in one area, will it simply think that it needs to do that everywhere else? And there's we'll say the ability to extrapolate on a single point, and what control exists there. So that's the first limit. The second limit is on, like I said, on the cost variance we went through there a second ago, which is, hey, look, there are just things you're not going to want it to do, because back to the MIT study, there might be things that humans can do not only better but more cheaply, especially now, depending on if you have access to Fable and you're using that at a super high premium. And then the third bit, is really in that decision making. We'll call it from an organizational point of view, and even I even think it was funny. Of all the places to be here in San Francisco, I was actually at a funeral this morning for my grandmother, who was born in San Francisco. Actually, she was literally born right up the street here, and it's such a human thing, right? And I was talking to a priest. The priest who was there, he's actually the priest who wrote the paper along with some of the team over at Anthropic, and we were having an interesting conversation on where does ethics play into the broader conversation of what's happening within this area. It's sort of it's workforce planning and then some. And so there's this additional component that I don't think we've even really gotten into, because here we are at the center of technology. We don't think about that part of it so much, but it is that benefit side. The benefit, I think, has a risk that we haven't even really gotten into a ton, which is, do I want to scare all of my people that I'm watching what they're doing and waiting to replace what it is that they're doing? And the answer is absolutely not, because in fact, I met 6 of our interns on the plane back from Chicago last night, and they couldn't be happier to be interns with us. They just saw something on my T-shirt that said,
"You're still hiring interns."
Absolutely. I mean, we're hiring as many people as we did last year, and we're changing who we're hiring. We're actually hiring a lot more kids who are pursuing sciences, and even in areas that go beyond engineering.
And where are you not hiring?
I think we're hiring a little bit in the less of just pure accounting. Also a function of where we're doing it. It's not that we're hiring less people overall, we're hiring less people in certain areas. But that's also just a function of globalization and how we're delivering services. But it's not really a function of the fact that we're saying, oh, we don't need these people because technology will do a lot of it. And that then goes back to your original premise of the question, which is, what are the limits that are there on the agentics themselves? The limits are going to be a tolerance for error, a tolerance for cost, and a tolerance, again, for what will be acceptable within the organization of having that thing do versus having, a human do it. And there'll be a cost dynamic to that part of it as well. But I think there's also even just the how do I run my business and how am I a positive leader, right, within a given community. It doesn't matter what type of company it is.
Dallas, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge your grandmother, and I'm sorry about her passing.
I appreciate that.
She spent her life here in San Francisco?
Here in San Francisco, yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about her, just briefly?
Sure. I mean, funny, daughter of an immigrant family, people who picked a lot of things in a lot of places around the world, including Argentina, and and Hawaii, funny enough, and thought, picking stuff out of the ground isn't a good deal. Like, we should move to San Francisco, and we're working the canneries up in Fisherman's Wharf, which is what her parents did. She actually worked in the telco industry. The first job was actually working for
Is that where you got it
for
from?
Bell. It must be.
Okay.
It must be the second T in the TMT, right? So for Grandma Fernandez Cortijo, yeah, like really a cool existence and just a great person and a great, kind of full circle story, right? I mean, I think this whole story of technology is such a cool thing that all this is happening in one. I mean, let's be honest, it's all happening kind of in one place here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and it's really neat to be able to like see that thread all the way pulled through, right? Like I've been able to do from a career point of view, and also be able to notice that there's actually a direct connection to the things that made this place a great place 150 years ago, or actually still the things that make it a great place, because it's still better, right, to work in a cannery or work for a telco company that is to pick something out of the ground, so to say, again, as my ancestors, concluded, back in the 1800s. But when you think about that, I think it does go back even to some of the things of like, what do you want to do, right? Like, I think you want to create technology that makes people's lives better in much the same way that our grandmas make our lives better, right? Grandma makes everything better. I think it's the same kind of concept. The things that we talk about every day are, how do we like build products? What are the entrepreneurs? They're trying to build products that make their customers, life better, or they make something easier to do, whether it's coding or whether it's, customer support or what have you. So I think we take that thread all the way through. That's actually where the ROI comes in. It's not going to be back to the token maxing. It's not going to be to how much you pay and how you pay it and what have you. It's a whole ecosystem shift in the way that we think about the outputs themselves. And the outputs, again, still are, am I serving my clients well? And they getting deal maximization out of what they're doing with any given company, frontier firm or hyperscaler or neocloud or whatever it might be.
Well, thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
Interesting. San Francisco. One of the things that I associate with San Francisco is it's a city where people are okay losing a little bit of control, whether that is building new technologies that do things a little bit differently than previous generations, or the fact that this city, or not everybody, but many people love LSD and mushrooms. And
you said you weren't going to mention that in our pre-call. Okay.
It is interesting with agents. You kind of lose control. It reminds me a little bit of skydiving in a way, where you jump out of a plane and you're like, whatever happens, but I hope there's a system ready to catch me. From your position, you're deploying agents in pretty high stakes moments. Even if you have the best governance in place, you have to be okay to a degree of losing control. So how do you become comfortable with that?
It's funny, right? I mean, I think how much can you really control, like in the engineering space, where you have the people like doing the code for you, or in our space where you have the individuals doing the services, they're preparing an audit or a tax return or a deal report or what have you. We're putting trust in these folks, many of you whom at like a superficial level. When you start layering technology into it, because my view is that it's an augmentation of those people to make them better, not necessarily ceding all the control from them and putting into something that I know less of, that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. If you start getting into the space where 100% of all the things that we do around, I don't know, let's say like booking travel becomes, agentified, right? You just put in the query and the travel gets booked. I think that's where you do get uncomfortable. Like, I appreciated that 2 nights ago, knowing I had to get back to hang out with you, Alex, and to make Grandma's thing this morning, like I can ping my EA late at night and say, hey, I need some help. Like, I need to make sure with tornadoes coming through Chicago, there's going to be at least a plane on Thursday morning that takes off at 6 a.m. that could get me to the West Coast. If I'm pushing that into an agent and I'm hopeful that it works and I'm hopeful that it books the flight, I mean, yeah, I might see the outcome, but isn't it neat, like having the human on the other line? Like Liz says, hey, I got you, bro. Like you're handled. She's augmented. She goes into our technology and can quickly query something and boom, pulls everything up and she books a flight within like 30 seconds, right? But having her there to make that a little bit better, does make the whole thing feel better. And, candidly, by the way, as it relates to what my EC does or my chief of staff and others do, they're able to do multiple person's jobs. If you think about what it was before, one person to one person, no, it's 1 to 12. We're doing a lot more with a lot less. So I look at this tech as just being an extrapolation on that point. Yeah, there's some things you're just not going to stop doing, but that's totally okay. It's no different than driving, right? It's like the self-driving dynamic. Like we are going to get really comfortable with that. I see this, move to agentic as being, very, very similar in a parallel run with that itself. It just so happens to be in the physical space.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me a lot of Waymo. You sort of, you white knuckle it in the beginning, and then you start to go on your phone.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I've done, at least.
Yeah, whole thing.
Anyway, don't take anything away from those previous comments about the mushrooms.
That's for later. That's happy hour.
Please join us on the roof at 5.
Exactly.
Dallas, thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure to speak with you, and I do appreciate your support and PwC support of this event. So
Great
thank you so
event.
much.
Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for
Great job.
Dallas.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, amazing. Thank you, Dallas. All right, folks, so we are going to have this next session. It's going to be an audience participation section, so we definitely want your questions for us, and then we're going to go to a coffee break. So, though for many of you he needs no introduction, let me introduce Ranjan Roy. I first started reading Ranjan Roy's writing in 2021. He had written this newsletter called Margins, and I thought it was a terrific newsletter. I saved it. I spent my winter break reading it. I DM'd him. By that January, we had decided to do an emergency podcast about a crazy financial situation. And then Ranjan and I kept talking more and more. And then by January 2023, I wrote to him and said, hey, don't you want to just come and do this every week? And lucky for me and lucky for us with anyone involved with Big Technology Podcast, Ranjan said yes. And so getting a chance to speak with Ranjan every Friday is an absolute joy. It's definitely one of the highlights of my week. And today we're thrilled to be able to do our Friday show live here with you, with your audience questions. And then we'll just run it tomorrow like a normal podcast. So I hope you're ready. We definitely need your participation. And please join me in welcoming Ranjan Roy.
I got them on. I'm going to take these off, though. We'll get into the Snap Spectacles. This is a medium risk maneuver because I have this microphone on, so.
Those are the Snapchat Spectacles.
These are
but
the
not the new one.
Snapchat Spectacles. They're the original developer beta edition, though, so they're not the new ones. But I had them in 2021.
Now everyone knows how cool you are. All right, should I start the
I'm as
show?
cool as Evan Spiegel.
That's right, yeah.
Is he
All right.
still cool, though? Yeah.
All right, let's do it. How would I start it?
Did I throw you off?
Yeah, no, I didn't
No?
even write this down.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll try to do it. All right. Snapchat comes out with new spectacles, and we take your audience questions. That's coming up right after this on a Big Technology Podcast Friday edition, recorded on Thursday. Welcome to Big Technology Podcast Friday edition, where we break down the news in our traditional cool-headed and nuanced format. We're joined, as always, by Ranjan Roy, who is here with us, not in studio, live, with the Big Technology AI Summit audience. Audience, let's hear you. The way this is going to work is Ranjan and I will break down one story, and then we definitely welcome your questions, your prompts, your arguments with us. If you don't have anything, we have plenty to do, but we'd love to have your participation. You can line up at either of the mics there to ask us a question. Let's start with our top story this week. I promised myself when this summit was being planned that I would not be mean to Snapchat. However, Snapchat has left me with no choice. John, let's roll image C, please. Listeners, if you are listening on the podcast, you'll see what we're looking at the audience here is a image of Evan Spiegel on CNBC wearing the latest Snap specs. The headline is Snap stock falls after AR specs debut. Almost 20 years since the launch of the iPhone, people are ready to think about computing differently, Spiegel said in an interview with CNBC. The market reacted differently. Ranjan, let me just go to you quickly. Do you think that Snapchat and Meta and all these other companies have been trying to build these AI device of the future for years, and this is what we're looking at?
This is what we're looking at.
You kind of ruined my surprise. Can we go to D, please? I mean,
I brought them. I had to bring them after sending Alex that photo.
is it time for us to finally accept that we're not going to have an AR device.
Interesting. So these, again, I got these in 2021. It's actually a very cool technology. Like I'm serious, augmented reality. If you ever used Magic Leap in the 2010s, like being able to paint throughout your room and walk around that painting, being able to play games where you're chasing zombies. Again, my 7-year-old son actually is probably the only fan of Snap Spectacles in the world right now. He still loves using them. He also likes to watch YouTube on them, which is kind of amazing. But I think that form factor and the experience is amazing. Vision Pro has not quite captured it. I don't think what we just saw on Evan Spiegel's face is going to capture it. I think eventually maybe Apple or someone will, but I don't think we're there yet, but I think we will be. I still am betting on AR eyeglasses of some sort.
Okay, I'm going to go to questions in a moment if anyone has one. So feel free to stand up there if you want. Otherwise, we can keep doing this. Here's some of the social media reaction. Does anyone that works at Snapchat have the guts to tell leadership that these things are ugly? That feeling when your glasses are so heavy they give you cauliflower ear? Snap is the best brand in the world when you're 16 and the worst brand when you're to be associated with when you're 21. The people who actually buy $2,000 AI glasses aren't teenagers. If you think you really want to wear always on camera around in public, it should have to look like this with a picture of Evan Spiegel. Let me make the case that it's over.
Good, because I'm going to take the other side.
I think that the iPhone Siri release that we just saw. So does anyone here listen to Ron John on Fridays?
Do we have listeners? All right. Okay. So you'll know which direction this might go.
What's this guy been begging for like since he came on the show the first time? Better Siri.
Better Siri.
I think they actually did it. Like the new Siri, if you look at the videos, looks terrific. And so maybe this idea of we have to wear the computing on our face is something that like kind of sounds good in concept, but model after model, it's not. And the AI device is the iPhone.
Okay, that is an interesting direction to take it. I still think the form factor, do any of the audience have like Meta Ray-Bans or any other device like that? I see a few. Like you start to feel as you're walking around, as you're kind of interacting in the real world, stuff can happen that's not just maybe eventually Siri talking to you and using a traditional AI model to actually, give you kind of information. So I don't know. I still think AR as a form factor via glasses is going to happen. I think you have Meta Ray-Bans. You enjoy them.
I didn't want to say this publicly, but I have not used them.
Really?
I have, but I don't. I use them for a bit, and like I said on our show recently, I was on a hike. It was cold. I was ready to get to the summit and put those glasses on, and the battery started blinking red, and I couldn't use them. I had to use my old phone. And let me say this, they haven't taken off as a mainstream consumer device. And if you look at the stock of every single company that's pursuing them, it's not good. Well, Snapchat, like we just said, is struggling. Meta, as we know, has its problems. No one's looking at these Ray-Bans to save Meta.
Well, no, but to me, the Apple Vision Pro is like the more direct correlated product.
You want to know what the best thing about the Vision Pro was?
Fine, Vision Pro, yeah.
They put the person on Vision Pro on Siri, and he fixed it.
Wait,
Mike Rockwell.
Oh.
So
I would not have guessed that the person who made the Vision Pro would be the one to fix Siri after all these years, but I guess if that's the case, that's exciting.
Did it?
Yeah.
So can you put those glasses on one more time?
Again, I was told backstage this might destroy my microphone, but I'm going to try. Do I look cool?
No.
No? No. I mean, even we were joking that Evan Spiegel is going to the Met Gala with his model wife. Like, this is like the coolest person in the world, and how bad they made him look. That if it was like when Zuck wore Project Orion, no one really cared that much. But I think because Evan Spiegel is such a cool looking dude, that's why it looks so egregious. That's my take.
So your answer on the way to make those things work is just be less handsome.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll write to Spiegel and let him know. No questions? Okay, all right, great.
All right.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Is it on? Yes, it is on.
And
hey guys, this is
if you're willing, let us know who you are. And
this is Sarbjeet Johal, actually, industry analyst. Flew from New York a day earlier to join you guys. So.
Welcome.
you.
Let's give him a welcome.
Thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you. Ask away.
Quick question about, actually, it's an observation. I want to get your take on this. When companies have this gap between what people need today and what they're working on, which is like in future, it can be 2+ years out. So they lose that traction from the investor's point of view, as well as employees and partners. So do you see that that's happening to Meta and others? Like it happened to IBM and they were living in future with Watson X, for example. So what's your take on that? It can be B2C or B2B examples.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do think, like, if we're talking about kind of how the interface for how you interact with a computer, I have been begging for something else other than me holding my phone looking at it. And we haven't really gotten anything for a long time. I mean, Humane tried with the pin. I still think maybe some kind of pin is going to be around. Johnny Ives pin at OpenAI, maybe at some point.
Well, Greg Brockman is coming, so we'll put it.
We got to ask him about the
We'll
pin.
talk about
We gotta
the
ask him
device.
about the pin. But I think like being able to interact with all of this information, now being able to like process information so much more reliably with AI, I don't want to have to keep looking at my phone and just looking at it on there. But even actually on the phone, I'm guessing, do a lot of people here dictate more to their phone right now? Like that's completely changed. In the past, like I would have felt weird just talking to my phone, and now I'm constantly using Whisperflow and just talking to whatever. So
Tell
that's,
a story about you and your wife.
I know this, okay. I don't know if this is the most depressing thing and my wife is not here and hopefully won't kill me if this is being live streamed right now.
No,
but-
we won't broadcast this.
So I am constantly dictating to my computer, to my phone. And the other day, it was like Friday night, we had put our son to bed. We're both on our laptops and I'm on one side of the couch dictating. And then I look over and she's also has her laptop open and is kind of whispering to her computer too. And I'm like, is this the future of
the
tech?
future.
But it's a new computing interface, so I'm happy about it.
Right. I think the gentleman brings up a great question, which is that things are moving so fast. How do you plan right now? And honestly, I don't know how you do it because every day there seems to be a new capability. Then the capability's taken off the table, like Fable, for instance. I mean, the tweets about Fable where like people are adding Dave Sachs and they're like, please, I'll do anything for Fable back. Just bring it back. And he won't bring it back. But it's just like, I don't understand how any company does that. And I think that actually would be a good topic for us to sort of get into on a future show.
Yep.
Okay, let's go this way.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I was curious your views on in the next like 5 years as AR glasses evolve, whether like the chunky spectacles is the way to go or thinner glasses with like outboard compute, like either wireless to your iPhone or like the Vision Pro, like cable down to the battery pack and compute. Well, it's a battery for a Vision Pro, but it could also have compute on board. So I'm curious, like the next 5 years, where you think consumers will gravitate towards?
No, it's a great question because if you ever use Magic Leap, there was like a puck. That's what it was.
Here's my hot take. Any device that requires a puck, not working.
Well, how about this though?
Okay, blow my mind.
What if the puck is your iPhone?
Oh, shit. All right.
Exactly. So, which gives Apple
I'm listening.
an opportunity that, like, if the compute is taking place on the phone in your pocket, it allows you to be much slimmer from a power perspective. You don't want like a lightning cable connected to your face, but like it's still, I think it makes me think Apple still has a good chance in this space because the iPhone can do all of the heavy lifting versus this thing that is really heavy on your head.
Can I ask? So, what's your name?
Kyle.
Kyle. So, what do you want to use a face computer for?
Oh, that's a good question.
See, I told you, Ron John, this stuff is not happening.
No. Kyle's got something.
All right, let's give Kyle an opportunity here.
What do you think for
I
like
didn't mean
10
to put you on the spot, but thank you for helping me prove my point.
I think one cool thing would be like a shared like TV or something. Like imagine Vision Pro and you have just a shared just like movie theater. You're on a plane with your family or something and you just have like the shared experience, but it's just glasses.
I like that.
I like that.
like that.
For me, one of the coolest things I always like is, as you get older, you move further away from your friends. And It would be cool to like be in the Vision
Knicks
Pro.
final together.
Yeah, sit half court, watch the Knicks next to Timothy Chalamet, but we're just in the Vision Pro. But you know what's interesting? Apple never advertised that as a social device. All the marketing was just, you're sitting alone at home, and all you're doing is the Vision Pro. Nobody else exists.
The
And I
other
think that's-
big one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, no,
I
go
would
ahead,
say the other
please.
big one for me is just having a lot of monitors around when I'm working. Like even though I have like an ultra wide or like 3 monitors, I feel like sometimes I could have more. So just being able to like interact with AI to pull up the exact page I'm looking for out of like, I'm one of those people that has like 1,000 tabs. So just being able to pull up the thing and I just say, open up that tab and it just pops up would be pretty cool.
Would 8,000 individual tabs in a giant planar space be better? Or
I like
No,
where
but I
Kyle's
agree.
going with this.
yeah,
All right.
no, but I do agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that being able to do more open scaled work and like look at different charts, and I think there's that still. And I know like I have friends who own the Vision Pro who use it for that.
Still.
No, but did.
Did. They had a nice time. All right, thank you, Kyle. Let's go here.
Hey, what's up? This is
What's
Sasha
Hey.
from Yale University doing research on AI agents for finance. First of all, love you guys. Listening to you guys chat on my way to work has
Thank you.
been my
Thank you.
routine. I think this
Well, we
is a
love you back.
sentiment shared by not just me, but many people in the audience. So thank you
Amazing.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And thank you for coming. Did you fly in?
Yes,
Oh my God! Thank you for coming. It's great to see you.
it's worth it. And I appreciate your sharp line of reasoning and questioning. So, what's your view on the meter benchmarks of how long the AI agents can work independently, being saturated? Are we at that point that of them being at infinite number of hours working yet, or are we reaching that soon? And what is the world going to be looking like after we hit that infinite mark?
That is an excellent question. So first of all, there is some controversy about the meter monitoring, but I think it's kind of directionally accurate, right? Like I showed the meter chart at the very beginning of our event today, that like you saw these models, they could not code autonomously for more than 30 minutes in 2023, and now they can code autonomously for the human equivalent of 18 hours, right? So what happens if they just kind of blow past that limit and then they can code all the time? That is an excellent question. Do you have any thoughts?
So I felt that with the Go mode and automation mode, it practically felt that they are already doing this autonomously forever.
Right.
I want them to send me reports. My prompt would be, if you find something interesting, send me an email.
Yes.
Then when I see it, I will come back and intervene. But I felt that for many tasks, it's already at that mark.
Yeah. No, a Perplexity computer will basically do that. So that's definitely something that's happening. But I'll just say one more thing, and then we'll go to Ranjan. Greg Brockman, who will be here later, has this like idea of a compute-powered economy, where like you sort of once you get these bots working the way that you explained, you just maybe he'll say this later. You just kind of throw them at any problem, and then they just kind of work autonomously through it. Now we've never seen what the world looks like when you can do something like that. But I do think, given the progress that we've seen with the models, you would imagine that something substantial will come at a certain point.
So my day job, I work at a company, Writer. We're an enterprise AI company, and when the goal mode was asked about recently, again, the idea that you just provide the goal, the agent will iteratively loop and keep doing work until it finds the right solution. In the real world, that is like the benchmarks versus the real world. I still think there's such a massive gap in terms of what does the data look like? What is the actual problem? Does the customer or the person actually understand the goal in a clear enough way that they're able to define it to kind of push that loop forward? So I think it's an interesting, I think with a lot of AI, again, even around the benchmarking, like again, versus real world understanding of how to use it, what's happening and what's available for it to use, there's still a lot of work to be done.
I mean, you can do these goal modes for like less complicated tasks.
What have you goal moded?
So I worked with Perplexity Computer recently to try to like have it find a hotel discount for me.
No travel stories. I've been on this has been for like 2 years. Every time, I remember like Sundar, actually, It was, I don't know if people remember, in 2019,
Didn't even let me finish
generative-
my example.
Wait, no. I'm just saying, why does everyone, when they talk about agentic, talk about travel? I get,
Because travel is such a pain in the ass.
but it's, I don't know. Okay, go on.
I'm sheepish now.
No. Hotel discount.
I just looked at the hotel every hour, and when it dropped behind us below a certain threshold, emailed me. So
All right.
that was pretty good.
Okay, that's a clear goal. I'll give you that as a clear goal.
I think you're right that we definitely need better examples than
It's
these
a
travel
pet peeve.
stories.
It's just for some reason, every Apple, the original ridiculous Bella Ramsey commercials around Apple Intelligence, of course, everything is flight booking and stuff. And again, like,
You have killed that Bella Ramsey commercial
sorry.
so often.
That one-
The creative agency is just gonna write to you.
and I love The Last of Us and I love Bella Ramsey, but those commercials still irked me.
What happened in those commercials?
One of them, she's sitting at someone that she can't remember who that person is, and in real time asks Apple Intelligence, like, tell me about this person, my interactions, which again is just such a weird thing. Like, I'm so much better than you that I don't know who you are, and I need to remember who you are and have AI tell me. And it didn't even come close to working with Apple Intelligence. So that was the worst one.
You know what would be good for that, actually?
What, goal mode?
AR glasses.
Oh, AR glasses. There's the real world use case.
Or the fact that that commercial was so bad just, again, proves my point that AR glasses aren't going to work. Okay, sorry. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you.
And we'll go over here.
Oh, he was behind.
Okay, fine. We'll go here.
Okay. Hi.
Hey, thanks for
Gerald
coming.
Harris. I'm on the board of the Commonwealth Club here, and I run some programs for the club, and I have a small scenario planning consultancy. But here's my question that I think hasn't come up here. What should we be concerned about in terms of using the AI models, them building a database on us, and then turning that into advertising? So the advertising potential revenue from users, do you think the AI companies will ever go after that revenue or use that information for advertising purposes?
Ooh, that's a good one. So will AIs build an amazing sort of profile of you based off of all the personal data and then use that for ads? Most certainly,
So
yes.
someone left one of the companies and wrote about that in the New York Times about 3 months
Yeah,
ago.
no, definitely. Yeah, that's coming. I think that advertising is obviously going to be one use where we're going to start to see some of the problematic stuff here. But actually, if you look at the ads that OpenAI gave you, it's sort of like more of a, and obviously they always come out with the high touch brand, and then they will like get you on the direct response, like super targeted stuff, once they realize they can't make money on brand. But like, it looks pretty good. Like if you're, sorry to go with a travel example again, but if you're like just researching travel on ChatGPT, like you can go into an advertising chat experience and it will help you. But I think that like, we have never had technology ever that collecting this much information about us. Has anyone here like talk to like ChatGPT or Claude and say, can you psychoanalyze me? If you're not, or give me any insight about myself? Just like 5 of you. The rest of you have done it.
Admit it.
It's scary, and that's the like gated stuff. And we're giving all this information to companies, and it's a trust thing that we don't really know where it's going to go.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, again, OpenAI originally ads are going to be a big part of the business. Now they've pivoted away from that a bit, but are still releasing ad products. At least Anthropic has not. I mean, I don't think they're going in that direction at all. Google and Gemini obviously 100% will. And like, you probably will get a really good ad experience. I mean, the more it knows about you, the types of questions you're asking. But it is like, like thousands and tens of thousands of 3 to 5 word Google searches are a lot different than entire thought partnership therapy, like research exploration. These models will know everything about you, and it's terrifying.
Have you done the psychoanalyze me prompt?
No, but I did. So I use like Claude and ChatGPT, Gemini. I'll kind of go through the 3 of them and cycle around. So it is funny. So I have asked, like, what do you know about me? Like, what would you ask back? And they all have very different kind of like jagged, jarring aggregations of who I am. Like, I don't know. They're, I don't have one that just knows me through and through.
I've done it.
Diversify.
I've done it with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then like it will first give you a answer that's like kind of sanitized, and then you say go a little deeper, and then you say get a little darker.
Oh dear. I have not red teamed ChatGPT.
I challenge you all to give it a shot.
Or don't go darker.
Don't
Don't go darker.
But if you really want to. Okay, thank you. Over here. And thank you for
Let's
the
move
question.
on. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys, and really appreciate all the work that you do on the podcast and YouTube. Your conversations go so deep and still very broad, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you. We appreciate it. So
And-
you're a listener or viewer?
Oh yeah,
All right.
both.
Thank you so
Depends
much.
on where I am.
Amazing. Appreciate it.
And my name is Sauji. I'm an advisor for startups in the AI space, and I've been in product management and go-to-market strategy. My question for you, somewhat related to the gentleman before, there is a lot of coverage on agents and what agents can do, and a little bit about the governance and cost control. What I don't see a lot about, is agents do drift. Probably why we don't have better examples than travel. And over the period of time, they don't get better at that specific understanding of the people and the business context and the operating model they're working in, and learn from it. And I was wondering, is there a lot of conversation that you guys are seeing around the learning of the learning layer in the agents, and is it too early or for that to happen? And the conversation is mostly around governance and cost and access.
It's actually a good question for Ranjan.
Yeah. So again, like working
you
in
for the
this all
question.
day, and thank you for the question. I think what's going to happen, and I'm already starting to see, is like 6 to 12 months ago, the approach was just jam as much information into whatever system you can, and we were kind of promised that it would just work. And AI is just gonna, and like there's, you'd get this feeling that, oh wait, a 100-page PDF, it actually could parse and I can get information out of. But then when you're doing that at any kind of agentic scale, it doesn't. And I think already like how information gets chunked up and like distributed in different ways and context windows, everyone would see like 1 million token context window, but we didn't really know what it meant. And now more and more and I actually think this is going to be one of the most interesting like professional opportunities and areas to be an expert in going forward, is like being able to kind of, it's funny, like it is as much art as science right now. But I think like the more you can start to grab a hold of how information flows through these agents and how you actually get it reliable, it's going to be a really, really interesting space. It's no one job right now.
Okay, thank you for the question. All right, we have 7 minutes, 3 questions. Let's see if we can keep the questions brief, and we'll keep the answers brief, and we'll get to everybody.
I'll try to be quick.
Thank
Hey
you.
everyone, big fan of the pod, by the
Thank
way.
you. What's your name?
Chris Obwehi. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Virus Watcher. I'm here
Okay.
with my colleague.
Oh, cool.
Flew in from
Nice.
Dallas. He flew in from Austin. Yes,
Nice.
a big fan.
We got a couple Dallas folks here today.
Oh, who's Dallas? Shout out Dallas.
Dwayne.
There we go. Okay, go Matt.
Oh. Oh, yeah, we're big in Texas.
I'm gonna go in a different direction with my question. I want to know kind of what y'all's thoughts, and honestly, if you can ask this kind of later on with Greg Brockman and others, what is the thought on using AI models and AI and technology for biological intelligence, biosurveillance, and public health for emerging risk detection with infectious diseases? Is a very interesting project that we're working on. We have a lot of epidemiologists on our team. We were just at the UN 2 weeks ago with the World Health Organization and trying to discuss these problems and how we can use the technology to kind of detect these things early on. So I kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on that.
Can I ask you a question back? And if you could give a brief answer, that would be great.
Okay.
Are you a believer in the bio capabilities of these models like Fable? Like, do you think Anthropic made the right decision by gating them?
Wait, bio capabilities meaning? Like, I think you're talking about biological weapons. He's talking about like disease.
Yeah,
Correct, but I think that
He's going to biological weapons.
His answer will give us
Okay,
insight
okay.
into the question.
I mean, I think it's a very touchy. There's no right answer, I don't think. But I do think it probably did more harm, than not allowing everyone to kind of take advantage of.
So you're not basically worried that today's cutting edge models could cause like new bio threats.
No, I am, but I think there's also a lot of
You would just say,
positive that
like,
could come out of it as well.
Let everybody use it though.
Yeah. I mean, I just, it doesn't even have to be a Fable style model. It can
Okay.
be, you can take a Frontier model, distill a more
Right, a safe
custom model. Yeah, safety with safety standards involved. But sorry, I don't want to be too long. I just want to.
No, great question. Ranjan?
In terms of the first part of it, I do think, again, and it's one of the underappreciated things, and I feel in the AI industry, disease prevention and scenario modeling around virus, we don't talk about that stuff enough, or whoever is trying to talk about it, it does not get listened to enough. So I love the kind of work you're doing, and those kind of stories would bring the AI industry a little bit better reputation, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You're thinking about biological weapons.
No, I think that if you can do one, then you could certainly do the other. Am I? What,
I don't know.
is one okay.
I actually have no idea.
So why are you giving me all these problems here? No, I hope that we can. And we
Sorry,
will.
I know it's a very
Yeah.
No.
We're going to speak with. We'll hopefully have some time to talk about health with Brockman.
Yeah, I would love. Yeah, if you can bring that up. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Over here.
My name is Heidi.
Hi,
I'm
Heidi.
your LinkedIn online friend.
That's right. You
thank
messaged me yesterday. Yes.
Thank you
for
for giving me
being
chance
here.
join this event, see each other in person. My question about before you with a different speaker mentioned about China. So I'm Chinese. I'm curious about why you think China is important business partnership with USA special high tech. Second question about Ray. So you mentioned a lot LM, large language model. So my question about Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude and Anderson, which one you prefer? Think about it in future. Is more stronger, smarter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, the question on China is sorry, what's the question on China?
No. Why you think it's important business relationship with USA?
Oh.
So yeah, thank you.
All right. I will take that question, and then Ranjan will answer which model he likes better. I think that we're obviously in this competition. The U.S. and China are in this competition, and there's a lot of suspicion on both ends. And I've said in the past that it would be great if there was better cooperation between the two countries. And people have told me that I'm naive, but I'm not going to lose that hope. I think that if in some ways competition's good, right? Because then you'll just have everybody striving to build a better thing. But we just talked about AI for health. If the countries were able to work together, maybe on specific initiatives, that would be much welcome.
I think the most interesting part of U.S. versus or U.S. with China in terms of AI, in the last few months, the conversation around moving towards DeepSeek and adding it into your agentic process or adding Chinese models did not exist in any conversation I was in 12 months ago, and now is in almost every conversation, at least as an option, because cost has become such a larger part of the conversation. So I think it's a good thing. I think the more integration there is overall across these systems, the better.
Yeah, but watch out for La Chaton Fat.
Oh, Le Chaton Fat, Mistral.
The cat holding the hands
I
with
know.
Dario and Sam is my favorite meme
Yeah.
the whole year. Okay, we have 1 minute left, but let's see if we can do it in a minute.
All right, I'll go through this quickly. Hi, Maria Sarah Roberts. I'm in business management consulting.
Hi,
My
thanks for
question's a
coming.
little bit different. As we are evolving into or entering or in a world already where endless possibilities are available, where and how do you see the evolution of the responsibilities that big tech companies have in supporting making this world better? Not the product and our engagement and how we interact with all the screens better, but rather the real big problems that the world has. And not because they should, but because they can. So how do you think about the evolution of that as we step into this world?
I'll answer that. Or do you want to answer? Go ahead.
We had a backstage, we had a long rant because I'd forgotten that Anthropic is a PBC, public benefit corporation, but I still think there is a responsibility. I don't actually see it happening in any kind of way because competition is so fierce. Now I wish it would, but I don't see it happening.
That was a good answer.
Oh, come on.
I want to make sure everybody gets to coffee. Oh no, screw it. I'll answer it. So Jeff Bezos, so I think they have an obligation to do good for the world. And I don't know if, and I know people within the companies are very serious about that. So they have their own side projects. But I think, as a society, maybe we can't expect them to do it out of the goodness of their own hearts. Jeff Bezos was recently doing an interview, and he said, I think what I do in the private sector is going to outweigh whatever I could do charitably. I disagree with that. And I think that that's just the mindset of a lot of people at the top of these companies. And so, like, everybody else needs to be aware of that and not count on it, even though it would be nice. So that's my perspective. All right, Ranjan, will you come back with us after the break and speak with Alex Stamos and I about whether this mythos and fable stuff is material or marketing?
You know I would love to.
You guys want to get a coffee break? Yeah. You guys are amazing.
Thank you very much.
So you may have heard that AI is in some trouble in Washington. And that story has led to a lot of guessing. People have guessed, are these models actually that dangerous? How much better are they than previous generations? And do they deserve to be restricted by the federal government? We've certainly done a lot of guessing, and I think the only way to get to the bottom of this is to speak with somebody who is deep in the weeds on the cybersecurity aspects of AI models, someone who secures them, and someone who has spent a career working in security, and that would be Alex Stamos. Alex Stamos is the former Chief Security Officer at Meta, and he's the current Chief Product Officer at Corridor. Ranjan and I have this debate all the time. Is what's going on with Mythos marketing or material? Well, let's get to the bottom of it. Ranjan will come out and be my co-interviewer for this one. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex Stamos and once again, Ranjan Roy. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, man.
Alex, boring times in your industry.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I am by far the poorest person in the afternoon lineup. It's like I bring down the mean net worth by a comma, I believe. So I do appreciate being here.
Well, Alex, I don't want to cue you into podcaster finances, but I think you're good.
Of the guests, I guess, yeah.
So talk a little bit about, we're obviously at this moment where the government has pulled down, or basically forced Anthropic to pull down Fable or Mythos, its frontier model.
Right, both of them, yes.
What happened?
Right, so just for recap for everybody, last Friday, what happened was the White House became aware of research that Amazon had done. It is not unreasonable for Amazon to do this work, right? So Amazon hosts Anthropic's models in what they call Bedrock. This includes in all of the classified spaces. So if the NSA is using Anthropic's models, it is running in AWS secret cloud or top secret cloud. And so Amazon is doing security testing. I expect this was part of getting ready to host Fable in Bedrock, and found some things that they wanted to complain about with Fable's protections that make Fable different than Mythos. I guess we can talk about the exact ones. Amazon had sent over these results to Anthropic. There was some disagreement between Anthropic and Amazon during the week of how serious they were. Now, I don't have the exact details here, but somehow, apparently, Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, mentions this to somebody at the White House, and the White House freaks out and, according to reporting, calls Anthropic and is not happy with how quickly they can get Anthropic on the phone. Anthropic is asking for more technical details. They're not able to get details from the White House of what the White House wants, so the White House orders them to take Fable down. Anthropic says, no, we can just fix these issues. Why don't we work it out together? And as a result, instead of working out together on Friday afternoon, something around 5 p.m. Pacific time, the Commerce Department signs an order saying that the models are designated export controlled and that no foreigner, including the foreign citizens who worked and actually built the models themselves, can touch them. Whether or not the administration actually has that legal power is disputed, but Anthropic decides to actually follow through instead of immediately getting a temporary restraining order. And because they have no ability to make sure that no foreign citizen is seeing the models, actually pulls them down. Both Mythos, which was privately accessible, as well as Fable, which was publicly available.
Now, you've spent a career working in security.
Yes.
Ranjan and I, for months now, have had this debate about whether all of this talk of doom and super powerful models from Anthropic, like for instance Mythos, a model so powerful that you can't access it, whether that represented a real capability increase or whether that was just marketing and it's a step change, not really a step change in capabilities. So I actually want to toss it to Rajan, who is firmly on the marketing side of this thing, just to make the argument of why you think this is marketing, and Alex can address that.
Yeah, I think trying to understand like what is that new capability that is so dangerous? What is that step change? I think the reason I get so suspect on it is how perfectly coordinated a lot of the marketing and communications are around how they roll these out. Like again, Mythos is the most dangerous thing. There's someone eating a sandwich in a park that actually got like where the model broke out of containment was like a PR release. It was a very coordinated thing. So what is that danger that they're trying to kind of bring to the world? Like, what is it really? What does it look like, feel like, or what is it actually going to be a problem?
So how much money do you guys have writing on this?
Well, how would we even play this? Like,
I don't even know.
Oh, like as a bet?
As a bet, like, is there a Polymarket?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm trying to see what my angle is here. Apparently, I have. Yeah.
Well, no, you are the person that
Played Eric
knows
Trump action.
You know the answers here, and we have just been kind of like debating
We just
on
like to
vibes.
argue. We just argue on.
So
vibes,
okay, so
yeah.
it's actually a little bit of a complicated answer. So Mythos is the best bug finding model that we know about, for sure. It is most likely the best bug finding model in the world. And I say most likely because we do not know what the Chinese secretly have in their labs. But for all the stuff for which we have open, known security evaluations for, it scores the best. Now, is it the avenging cyber god that Anthropic makes it out to be? I personally don't think so.
Yes.
It is.
You're not necessarily. You're not right
Okay,
yet.
but it is really good. It is really good at finding bugs. But from my perspective, the Opus 4.8, GPT 5.5, a bunch of other models are here, and Mythos is here.
At bug finding.
At bug finding and exploit development, and it is not here, which is kind of where you would think from reading all this stuff. The other thing is that everybody pretends that Mythos was the breakthrough, but that is not true. For people in the security world who've been paying attention, this Rubicon was crossed well last year with the Opus 4 series, with the GPT-5 series. That is when the models became better or as good or better than the best human bug finders. And not just as good as the best bug finders, and there's like 50 or 100 of these people, and I know a couple dozen of them. The problem is those people are very expensive, right? And they don't scale. You can't just throw water on them and make them multiply like gremlins. That would be nice. I mean, certainly the NSA would love that. But models can. You can just scale them as much as you want with money and power and GPUs. And so that last year was a huge deal because all of a sudden you saw these amateur bug finders. Imagine you went to a high school track meet and every single kid is posting Olympic world record times. Yeah. You'd be like, man, they're juicing, right? That something had happened. That is what last year was like mid to late last year in the vulnerability discovery world is the kids started juicing, right? Yeah. And it's because the models hit this point where they could find everything. And so, yes, Mythos is really good at finding bugs. It's really good at writing exploits. Fable is not. And so that is what the whole point of Fable is. It is the same model weights as Mythos, but Anthropic put a protection in place to keep it from doing the really nasty stuff that Mythos will do. And Amazon has some complaints about that. But what happened is the complaints Amazon has, a number of us have looked at them, and then Anthropic has pushed back. Even with the jailbreaks that Amazon has, you cannot get Fable to do things that you can't do with the Opus series, with GPT-5, and even with a bunch of Chinese models. Okay. So that is why the actions by the Trump administration make absolutely no sense, because those models will not refuse at all. You can just ask GPT-5 to go find these bugs, and it will go do it for you. You can just ask Kimi, which is an open source Chinese model, it will go write you these exploits. And so, yes, you can trick Fable into doing certain things, but you can't trick it into doing the really powerful Mythos stuff, which is like grind on the Linux kernel for all day and find a bunch of bugs, which will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, it turns out, if you pay the full price. And those have not been jailbroken, and so there's no real good reason for what happened. So yes, Mythos is really powerful. It has only been accessible to a very small number of companies. It is not magically powerful. The other thing you have to remember here is like, bugs are cheap. Exploits are, like, we're now drowning in bugs because these models are so good at finding, and we have so much bad software. We've been writing bad software forever, and it turns out that like human beings writing code in C and C++ especially was a really bad idea. That like we should not have been writing, like building our entire lives like based upon memory unsafe languages. And then in the presence of these superhuman bug finders, not just Mythos, but all of them, that was not a good idea. And so if you're a pedestrian and you get hit by a F-150 at 80 miles per hour or a McLaren at 200 miles per hour, you don't really care. You're dead, right? And that's the difference here, is like the Mythos is the F1,
preference.
right?
Mythos is
like,
the F1. And
yeah, exactly. And Kimi or
4.8
GLM52 is the F-150. And so you could take the McLaren off the market, but all you've done is actually hurt the defenders who want to have full coverage, right? Who want to be able to find all the bugs. An attacker only needs 1 or 2 bugs to string together to actually pull off the attack. And so that's why, so about 150 of us wrote this open letter and signed it saying this is really stupid because all you're doing is hurting defenders and you're also really hurting the US AI industry.
Okay, I think Ranjan wins the debate.
Well, no, it's not all marketing, but it's not all marketing. But like, I just want to say, like, Mythos is really powerful, but doesn't really matter because there's so many bugs out there that you can use any of these models to find them. What I'd like to do is I'd like to shift the debate one away from finding bugs, because the other problem here is like, we cannot set the standard that US AI models can't find bugs. That is a terrible, terrible, terrible standard. If you are writing software with an LLM, it has to be able to understand what a bug looks like so it does not write those bugs. It has to. And that's the trick actually Amazon used, was they tricked it into basically finding bugs in individual lines of code because it has to be able to do that to write secure code. If American LLMs know nothing about security, they will create more security flaws. So we cannot create a standard where American LLMs are dumb about security. That would be a humongous own goal. And that is one of the possible outcomes here of this whole brouhaha that would be really stupid. And so, I think, yes, I don't think either one of you wins. I mean, as the referee here, I think Ranjan has a little bit of you have a point, but Mythos is really good. It doesn't, Anthropic has played it up too much. OpenAI is rumored to be releasing something that's Mythos quality really soon. And I doubt that they're gonna follow, they'll just give it a number. I think they've learned from Anthropic, you don't call your thing like the Cyber Gorgon.
That actually would sell.
Yeah, it sells a little too well, right?
Right.
Maybe as a Greek with the Odyssey coming out, I'm getting a little sensitive about the marketing here, but let's back off on the naming scheme and move back to numbers. But I think a big part of this is we just have to reset the standard of not bug finding, but the actual creation of exploits and then other kinds of offensive operations, of which there's a bunch of other things you can do offensively with these models. Those are the things that we should call off limits, not bug finding, because that is something that we have to do much more quickly than we're doing right now.
Can I just want to try to articulate my point, which is, this is, all right, so when we talk about is Mythos material or is Mythos marketing, my argument would be if something was material, it would look a lot like what we're seeing today, right? At a certain point, these models are increasing in capabilities. You're gonna want to put some safeguards on them. Yes. And so is what Anthropic is doing that different from where you'd want to be if you actually had these concerns?
I mean, I think both Anthropic and OpenAI have a path in which they have a KYC model. Now,
know your customer.
Know your customer, yeah. So OpenAI actually has couple levels. They have a public one where you can basically say, I want access to cyber capabilities, and then they have a private one. I believe Anthropic only has the private one, right, to get access to Mythos. But I do think it's reasonable to have some level of gating. But in the case of Glasswing, I think it was honestly, I thought it was not widespread enough. I know of like critical infrastructure companies that don't have access to Mythos right now.
Nobody does right now.
Well, no, right now, okay, but before last week,
Right.
like people who should have had access did not have access. Now, seeing what happened here, you can see why they were so careful. But from my perspective, as defenders, we are in a race against time, right? We have all of these bugs that need to be fixed. And we also have this weird thing where we're like, this whole conversation is predicated on the idea that like the American labs are years ahead of our adversaries. And that is just not true, right? So while Fable was shut down, on Tuesday of this week, GLM 5.2 was shipped, right, from Z.AI, which is a Chinese lab. This is an open weight model. It is MIT licensed. So any of you can go not just download the weights from Hugging Face, but you can include it in your own product and you can retrain it. It is within percentage points of the top closed models from Anthropic and OpenAI in a bunch of things, a bunch of evals. We don't know how good it is at bug finding yet, so there hasn't been any good testing here. But in coding and a bunch of other intelligence tasks, it's almost as good as the best the United States has. And that's the best Chinese model we know about, right? Unlike American labs, the Chinese are not going to announce their Mythos, right? And so the idea that we should be doing everything in the United States to just be playing defense is, we're playing like a defensive model here. That is stupid from my perspective. We need to be accelerating our capability to do these things and not just playing defense.
Well, now I am sufficiently scared, even though I've thought that the Mythos was pure marketing. But what do we do about it? Like, how do we? What is that? Like, and I think I share that Glasswing. Again, why it felt like marketing to me, it was this kind of exclusive club that people were invited to, and I actually spoke with people who are using it, and they spoke about it almost like it was a club. Like, oh yeah, we got access to Mythos. We're spending a ton of money. Like, I think what should it look like, this kind of rollout, to actually help us? Yeah.
In Glasswing, I mean, they're fixing real bugs. They have found like 10,000 bugs. Now, one of the problems with Glasswing is they've found like 10,000 bugs, but they've only fixed 1,000, right? So like, you do not want a 10-to-1 ratio of the bugs you found to fixed. We just joined a thing called Project Athena, which ChainGuard is running, which is all about fixing specifically open source bugs, right? So Glasswing a lot of that is closed source with inside commercial companies. We are part of this coalition that is using Mythos to fix open source bugs, which is a huge challenge because like just finding the people who have access to that source code, commit access is difficult. So that's going to be a huge push. So it's not like just totally BS. I do think that one of the things that's going on here is that if these companies ran any modern AI security tool against their code base, they'd find 80% of those bugs. They don't have to use Mythos, right?
Okay.
So it's just that they've never looked, right? They're like,
that's concerning.
Yeah, right. And so they're like, oh yeah, I've got this old crappy code, and they look for the first time, and all of a sudden they find.
And they could have done it a year ago or 6 months ago and found some number or some percentage.
I had this conversation with the CEO this morning, who's like, "How do I get into Mythos, Alex?
Like,
who can you
just
call?"
start. Yeah.
And I said, "Don't wait. Here you go. Here's an API key for Opus right now.
Yeah.
It works today. Because do not wait for the Trump administration to figure out what they're doing with Mythos. Use Opus 4.8 right now, and I guarantee you'll get 70% of the bugs you care about."
Alex, you're a security researcher. One of the stipulations about getting Fable back. So, by the way, Anthropic has said they expect Fable to come back on soon. But one of the stipulations that's been talked about to do that is that they have to prevent it from being able to be jailbroken. Is that possible?
Yeah,
No.
I saw you did jailbreak in air quotes.
Yeah, no.
So we have 2 minutes left. So talk a little bit about why that's not possible.
No, there's actually a paper from NIST. It's like a kind of a Gödel completeness theorem kind of paper that basically says it's impossible to make a model that is completely not jailbreakable. Like I said, Fable needs to be able to understand what security flaws are to be able to do its job. I think what Anthropic might, the game they might be playing here is redefine what jailbreak is back to what their system card says. So their system card says, we define different levels of cyber capability, and finding a couple of bugs and knowing what a bug is okay, but we won't let you like build exploit chains and do lots of long-term stuff. And so if they can define back to their system card what a jailbreak is, then they're fine, right? What would be terrible for the entire American AI and cybersecurity industries is if the Trump administration defines a jailbreak as having any ability to find any vulnerability in code, because then all of us have to go to Chinese models. That's it. Yes. Like that would be a terrible, terrible outcome. And that might happen because unfortunately, the news that broke just in the last couple hours is Politico is reporting that Anthropic and the Trump administration are negotiating what the AI safety standards should be. So like, I don't know, it's like Howard Lutnick writing an eval right now. Like, I find that a little terrifying. So I am hoping that Anthropic, obviously there's very smart people at Anthropic working on this. I am hoping that they are able to come up with something reasonable that moves stuff towards exploitation, not bug finding. Like, we have to have the ability as defenders to find and fix flaws. The other thing I just want, because we don't have a lot of time, the other real own goal here was that this injected a type of political instability and political risk into the US AI industry that did not exist. There are a bunch of companies that are now going to have to use open weight models because at any time on a Friday afternoon, it's a good thing that Fable is only out for a week because people didn't have time to work it into their critical path. But if Fable had been out for a month and at 5 p.m. on a Friday, all of a sudden it got yanked, then pagers across the country would have gone off because everybody's systems would have fallen over. And so now, this week, CIOs and CTOs are signing contracts to have open weight models on different hosts, on US hosts. They're not using Chinese hosts, but they're using Chinese models as backups through LLM routers because political risk is now a risk of using AI companies. That is a massive own goal. The United States of America does not need to do that. We should not do that again. That is incredibly stupid at a moment of maximum pressure from the People's Republic of China. And so I can't stress enough, like, we lost a war this weekend. Like, let's not lose another war by making it unreliable to utilize the United States for AI.
Alex, will you come on the show for a longer conversation
Absolutely,
about this?
I'd love to, yeah.
Alex Stamos and Ron John Roy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So Anthropic is not just a massive model builder, it's a massive product builder as well, with products like Claude Code and Cowork that have taken off like crazy over the past few months. And Claude Code came out of a place that few of us know much about called Anthropic Labs. And Anthropic Labs is a organization within Anthropic that is working on building the next level of frontier products with AI at the center. And so today we are lucky to hear from the person running that lab, Mike Krieger, who is the co-founder of Instagram and now the lead of Anthropic Labs at Anthropic. We're going to welcome him on stage along with Lauren Good of Wired, who will join me as a co-interview. Mike and Lauren, let's hear it for both of you guys. Hey, good to see you.
First of all, I mean, we want to talk about what you're working on at Labs and explain your role to folks. But I want to ask you first, how close are you right now to the situation with the White House?
Less than in my CPO role. So I transitioned about 5 months ago into this Labs role. I think in the CPO role, I think would have been deep in it. Now I'm more, obviously, we want to restore it. And as a product person, I want to make sure that gets access, but less close to it than, in that sort of C-level role that I had before.
Okay. Alex, do you have a follow-up?
Oh,
I have
yeah.
8 follow-ups.
Definitely. Well, there was a guy named Ben on X who said, I will mail Anthropic an original copy of my long-form birth certificate if they will enable Fable for me again. I sound like those lunatics who are obsessed with 4.0 now. Will you take Ben's long form?
I don't know that we'll take his long form, but it has been interesting. I mean, Fable was only available for a few days, but I've definitely, every time I've tweeted since then, they have not read whatever I was tweeting, and they've mostly been bring back Fable, which in Instagram, we got rid of Gotham. Do you remember Gotham, the filter? This is and then for the rest of the next 8 years, all I heard was bring back Gotham. So it struck a nerve. Fable will come back before Gotham did. But yeah, it's clearly the folks that have gotten to use it and started incorporating it. It's actually really interesting. I've learned to not really trust day of or even week of model reactions. You don't really know until you've put it through its paces. And so I almost just completely block out the noise in the first couple of days of any new model release because I don't know, everybody has maybe their toy example thing that they like to do with a new model, but it's hard to actually put it through its paces until you've actually had real work done with it. And I think people were just starting to do that, and then we had to sort of pull back Fable. But I remember in December when we put out Opus 4.6, it was this interesting time where everybody went home for the holidays, and a lot of people had that week off between Christmas and New Year's. And then they came back and were like, oh, I spent a lot of time and I really get why Opus is good and I'm going to do it. So I don't think Fable has had that opportunity yet.
But despite that, though, I mean, this was a pretty big reaction from the Trump administration, and I think everyone here, especially if you were listening to the Alex Stamos session, understands what's going on. But this happened within a few days of the model release. If I can give Wired some credit, Wired just reported last night that it was due to Anthropic's relationship with, or having given access to the model to SK Telecom that could have raised flags within the administration. How surprised were you by how immediate that backlash was?
Yeah, I think the sort of reaction decision was surprising, and we were sort of immediately engaged with them to restore access as well. And so, at the same time, the one thing that we think a lot about internally is, there used to be a poster on the Facebook wall when we were still, that was like, every day feels like a week. And I think that's becoming true in AI. And I think a good thing to remind ourselves of in general in the industry is we're dealing with unprecedented times, we're dealing with new situations, and they can develop really quickly as well. And so I think also developing the capabilities and the connections and to make sure those conversations can happen quickly is really, really important.
I have a new motto suggestion for you, for the wall. Move fast and jailbreak things.
I don't think they're going to use that, Lauren.
Okay.
We just heard from Alex that some of these capabilities have been available on previous models, or you can find bugs with other models that are available today. So why do you think Anthropic got singled out on this front?
I don't know why, Fable specifically was singled out as, again, Fable being the non-cyber intention model as well. I think the thing that does change over time is there's, the capabilities if you knew what to prompt and knew what you were looking for, and then there's the capabilities, I think, I'm not sure I resonate with the juicing high school athletes metaphor from Alex, but the uplift that you get, uplift is a thing that we think about a lot when we think about model safety. So if you look at our model cards, for example, one of the ways we look at risk in the bio domain is comparing the uplift from sort of a layperson using the model versus an expert or a layperson just using the internet, and seeing what the comparison there is. And so that is one trend that is has been progressing as the models get more capable. And so maybe less why Fable is singled out and maybe more like what the overall trajectory is.
Interesting. So we just had Ara Karazian, the lead economist on RAMP, on the podcast. And one of the interesting things that he said was, we had, during the Pentagon situation, there were these headlines, okay, this company will not use Anthropic anymore. But actually the data from RAMP shows that spending actually increased to Anthropic models. It was apparently a good publicity moment for the company. So I think it sort of plays into a debate that we have here on the show about how much of this is real concern for the issues and how much of it is, from Anthropic is marketing. And we have somebody from Anthropic here who can actually shed some light on that. We just had Stamos talking a little bit about it from his perspective on the security side, but we're lucky to have you here today. So is it material or is it marketing or some combination?
I mean, I think it is one of the hardest things to really deeply believe that something is true and not marketing, and then due to not even just Anthropic, I think I think people are generally right to be skeptical of any company saying anything, and you should put it through your own filters as well. But for me personally, I'm always no, but it's real, and we both deeply care about safety and are to the extent that we are being vocal about anything, it is to either sort of help paint the picture of what very likely is coming or we believe is coming, or what we've already seen and spotted. For example, in the Mythos case, really just looking at vulnerability scanning and bug finding and doing it in partnership with companies that were in that kind of Project Glasswing initial announcement. And so the technology is awesome, not in the in the just it is doing really incredible things, and therefore even calling out what we see as what is happening, I think can seem hypey. I wish I could press a button and I could make everybody believe that we are not being hypey. I realize that's not the reality that we operate in, but at least from my perspective, we try to call it like it is.
My understanding is that within labs in particular, and research and development at Anthropic, that you're using the best AI models to actually build new products, to prototype new products, and sort of test out your thesis. So is this ban essentially now limiting your ability to do that within labs?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Fable is the best model I've ever used.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that work has stopped, but it's definitely less good than the other models or we are using models that are less good than that as well. And It is also, I mean, maybe the reverse of the distrusting the first week, response is what happens when you don't have Fable. And like, obviously the Twitter reaction for the people that had already kind of like gotten into the model and were using it was strong. But I'd say even in my personal use, I'm like, oh, like I'm on Opus 4.8 and it's good. Like I'm still productive, I'm doing work. But, and we can go into sort of like how my work changed with sort of these like Fable or like, the models of that sort of family. But it is noticeable for sure.
Yeah, I think we'd like to know that. I mean, the public had access to Fable for like a half a minute. Groups in this like Project Glasswing have had access to Mythos. We don't really know what the difference is between using a model that you can use today and using one of these, super Anthropic models. Yeah. So what actually could you do differently with a Fable or a Mythos?
I think for me, it's the sort of scope and scale of delegation. All these things are really imperfect. Like, people will say like, oh, is this now a level 5 software engineer or a level 6? But anybody who's used these models extensively knows that they're still spiky in capabilities, right? In some ways, in many ways, they're a better engineer than me. And in other ways, like, I was complaining today that it had missed a descender, like the G, that bottom part is called the descender. I'm like, how did you put that in the UI? And it's clipped. And of course, like there's vision capabilities that need to improve, and there's debugging capabilities, and there's sometimes even just sort of human common sense that is, we're way better at than the models are. But overall, I think the big shift for me working, and it was really interesting because it sort of coincided with me going back into a builder role. So I really got to see going from, using these models as an executive, you're trying to do the most of them, but like not going to have it write all your email, and I think strategy still needs to come from you, and then you can use the models to sort of pressure test it. But going back into a builder role and going from, okay, I am delegating chunks like, please fix this bug, or I'm thinking of implementing this feature, let's go back and forth, to something that ends up being much more sort of, all right, like I got this bug report from one of our users, or I have this notion of something that I want to build. Like, can you sketch out 2 or 3 ways in which we could do it? Right, like that seems plausible. Often I find, actually, sometimes it'll give me the sort of explanation or proposal and be like, okay, that actually is over my head. Like, you are clearly way smarter than me. Like, explain it to me like I'm maybe not 5, but at least, not you. And it'll sometimes, explain it that way. But then go build it and getting it right, like, at a very, very, very high rate. And I think that starts really changing how you operate. Like I moved much more to, before going to bed, making sure that I had like queued up for Fable, like enough chunky work to last. I would call it the whole night, and then I would check in later and it got it done in an hour, and it was like, I guess, hanging out for the next 7 hours. But like really like delegating like much more of a goal than just a...
So one task, for example.
Yeah.
Like give us an example of one task you would hand to it.
Here's a kind of crazy one, which is for the programmers in the audience. Like I had written one of our labs projects in Python. That's like the language I know well. Instagram was all Python, and for like some not super exciting reasons, we actually needed it to be in TypeScript to deploy it. And I was like, all right, that's going to be like, in Instagram, we for years talked about moving from Python to PHP or Hack or the Facebook language after the acquisition, and at least when I was there, never did. But we have a feature called dynamic workflows where you can have it like also break down the task into like a lot of subtasks. And I trusted it to sort of not just do the individual action, but here's like a whole language conversion of hundreds of thousands of lines of code at that point. Go off and do it, go plan it, go execute it, go verify the work, double verify the work, and then I came back to the work being complete. So that level of like, this is a big sort of chunky task.
So you're basically saying it was faster, did it in an hour. You're guessing compared to, with Fable, compared to what it would have been before.
I think the main difference is in the past, it would be like, great, I did it. And you'd be like, did you? You kind of took a shortcut here, or this is not quite right, or I need to go verify it, or like, oh, you cut this corner, or...
It's like the managing interns thing that everyone's been saying for the past year.
Yeah,
which is very offensive to interns, by the way, but
right.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I don't know, have you managed an intern?
Yeah, that's true. And and you're saying it was more correct. It was so it's faster, it's more accurate, more reliable, and then, according to the U.S. administration, dangerous.
I think the other piece is it has like a greater theory of mind is the wrong word, but sort of like theory of project, so that it's less, oh, I'm going to make this change, and it'll say, great, I'll make this change. But really, especially if you've done like software engineering at scale, the best engineers kind of keep in mind all the disparate parts of how this thinks, and they also see around the corners. Like, I can make this change, but if I don't do it in this way, then the next change is going to be incrementally harder. And I think that's like been a significant difference I've seen in that kind of class of models.
Okay. So I think when we talk about Anthropic Labs, right, people think of Claude Code because it is really your breakout product, and it sounds like you've been tasked with basically figuring out what the next Claude Code is. Would you say that's an accurate description of what you're doing at Labs? And also, why does Anthropic need Labs?
Labs, it's also maybe worth thinking about why we needed Labs in 2024 when I arrived and why we need Labs today, because I think that the answer kind of shifts. I started the original Labs team with Ben Mann, who's one of the co-founders of Anthropic, in my third week at Anthropic, and it had been something that had been bubbling under. And at the time, the reason was really different. It was all of our product engineering team was 25 people, and we didn't have the models really. Like we had Claude, when I joined, it was Sonnet 3, like you an Opus 3, like those were for their time good models, but they were not even interns, right? They weren't even IC3 engineers. So if you have a team of only 25 or 30 engineers, they are working on like the next, incremental thing. And we were feeling like the models are starting to get better, but we don't have any products that sort of show that off. Like a good litmus test for me is when we get ready to release a model, do we have either a product or a demo or some other illustration of something that is very different? And it gets harder over time. Like with Fable, even like illustrating like that weekend task or this longer amount of work. So really Labs at the time was, let's make sure we don't, like our products don't fall behind the model exponential that's happening. So Claude Code came out of that initial one because nobody in the rest of the product orgs, people were thinking about coding, but nobody was sort of had the like space to go and think about, well, what if we totally change the form factor and we embrace the fact that the models were going to evolve in this way? And a lot of the two most useful thought exercises we do in Labs, one is like visualize the gap between what the models can do today and how most people use it, and can we close that gap? So that's one. And the other one is imagine what the models are bad at now that they're actually going to be really good at in 6 months, and let's make sure we have a product ready for that by then. And I think those are like the two guiding questions for Labs. And then also out of that first incarnation came computer use. Computer use was different though, because when we built it, it was really bad. Like we tried a bunch of products with it, and this was around Sonnet 3.5, and you'd be like, Claude, can you help me, clean up my desktop? And it would like click the thing, and it would delete the file. You're like, this is not safe for release. We're definitely not going to go and build this or to ship this. But we had that product so that every new model that we'd release, we'd first check it internally and say, did computer use get better? And we'd tell the research team how it had gotten better or worse, until the moment where we said, it's good enough, we're actually going to put a product out around this. So it also gives you this sort of beacon into the future that then you can kind of measure your future products against. But then compare it to now. So we have a thriving product team. There's CoWork. There's, Claude Code has grown a lot. We have our platform. And now I think it's actually much less about none of these product teams are doing this sort of thinking. And I think it's much more that the models are advancing really quickly, and even our capability to interact with them needs to evolve. So one of the things we collaborated with Labs and Claude Code that we ship today is Claude Code Artifacts. So having Claude Code not just be able to type back to you, but also sort of draw a picture or give you an illustration. And that partially came from spending a lot of time in Labs saying, just a text box and a big text response is not going to cut it anymore. Like when I mentioned that the models feel like they're way smarter than me when they talk to me, sometimes I'm like, can you draw me a picture? Because this is what I actually need to fully understand this. But it's really what we've been thinking about is, yes, we have a lot more products. We actually have a lot of consolidation to do in our products. Like that's another initiative that we have. But within that, we still have an opportunity to make things much more accessible to a person that does not spend all of their time thinking about prompting and the exponential and the difference between high, low, and medium effort. Like there's a lot we can still do there.
But Mike, so there's it puts people using Anthropic models in an interesting place, right? Cursor, I think, just sold for $60 billion to SpaceX. And someone put this meme on Twitter that Cursor would have sold for $300 billion if it wasn't for this guy. And it's a picture of Boris Cherny, the person who created Claude Code. And so for companies that are going to build on top of Anthropic technology, they're going to wonder, do I want to partner with Anthropic, or is Anthropic going to go ahead and build the product that I'm going to want to build, potentially even after partnering with them?
Yeah. I mean, we'll take the agentic coding side, and I think the broader sort of aspect of being both a platform and a product, I think is really interesting. When we take on projects, the goal is often to sort of push that area of the industry forward. So, there were AI coding editors, and some of them were really good, and but nobody was quite thinking about it in as sort of free-form a way as we got to think about it with Claude Code. And now a lot more products have that flavor than I think would have otherwise. And so I think if we're ever, you can call me out on this, Alex, if we're ever entering an industry where like all you're doing is the same thing everybody else is doing, but like you've got the Anthropic brand, I feel like that's a bad use of our time and a bad use of our either labs or product team time. Like if we're going in somewhere, it should hopefully be to say, all right, we think that the direction of travel is this way. We can build a product of that. And then, by the way, there's no world, nor should there be a world where like all the products are Anthropic products. That'll be a bad world, right? So like that is hopefully either creating new space for companies or sort of showing the way where other products can incorporate.
Yeah, it would almost be like working for a tech company that has like social, messaging, video, right,
Yeah.
Mike? Yeah.
hard,
Okay.
You did leave.
Well, there was some question, for example, when Anthropic launched a product that was seen as competitive to Figma, and you had been on the Figma board prior to that, and I think you stepped down. Is that correct? Yeah. And so it's a good question that Alex has brought up. I think where Silicon Valley is known for this really healthy, vibrant, risk-tolerant startup ecosystem, and when the bigs start coming in with tons of venture capital and a lot of resources, people say, well, wait, are they essentially just going to steal my idea?
Yeah. No, I think our dual existence, and it's something that other companies have to navigate. You all talked about Amazon a lot in the previous panel. Like they have to navigate this role where they are both the infrastructure provider. They obviously have a very large e-commerce thing. They do video, but they also serve video, and then by and large, customers can live in that dual world of like, okay, I'm using their infrastructure, also knowing that they are also using their infrastructure to do that. And I think you can talk to our customers and see how well we're doing at this. Like the thing I always try to do is like at least approach it with a lot of transparency. So the Cursor example is an interesting one where like Michael and I talked a lot over the time around here's where things are heading, similarly with the other products that we think about. Like I think it's a couple of things. It's transparency, and then it's shared building blocks. Like I think. In general, and I actually don't think there's any cases where this is even true, like we're trying to build on top of the same capabilities that are available elsewhere. The last time I was here in the Commonwealth Club on this stage was our healthcare day at the beginning of the year, and we didn't ship like Claude Healthcare, only we have it, like nobody else has it. We shipped a bunch of like plugins and skills and MCPs and like complementary abilities. So that's how, I'm not claiming it's easy or that it's a straightforward thing, but it is how we're trying to navigate what is like admittedly a complicated sort of situation.
Speaking of startups, Anthropic is still technically a startup, but you're worth a lot of money. I mean, what's the latest valuation? Is it $965 billion or something like that?
So they sold Instagram for $1 billion, right?
Startup.
In 2010 money.
Right, right. Financials have changed quite a bit since then. And yet Anthropic has positioned itself, it is a PBC, and it's positioned itself as sort of a more ethical company around building AI. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you see that positioning, and Anthropic's role in particular, changing the culture of the Valley. Like, I think back to how Google in the beginning of the 2000s really changed the culture of Silicon Valley in so many ways. And how do you see Anthropic's culture now dictating this next era?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Maybe I'll start like inside, and I think there's an external component too. I think the reason I joined in the first place, so I was winding down my second startup, and knew I wanted to go work at a frontier lab because I had started to use these models for coding, and they were bad at coding, but I could see that they were as bad as they were ever going to be at coding. They were going to improve. And I had started building on top of these APIs. So the startup I was doing was called Artifact, and we did sort of AI-powered sort of news recommendations. And actually read a lot of big technology via Artifact back in the day. It was one of the things we added. So,
but not Wired.
You guys had a really hard paywall, to be honest.
Fair enough.
We didn't do very.
Do you need a discount on my subscription? Because I can get one for you. Okay.
It's actually really funny, like
making deals.
Yeah, making deals. It's the login cookies. It's like really hard to keep people. Like,
I know. Yeah. Please escalate this to Condé Nast. Yes. I know.
And email logins very hard to do in and out. But I was building on top of the APIs and be like, wow, okay, they're able to do really interesting things. But what ultimately made me go to Anthropic was like they walked the walk, and they really deeply believe in trying to make AI go well for humanity. And that is in the water internally, and I think has been why I think the company has remained as cohesive as it has, even as we've grown. And I think that it's like a testament also to the co-founders there on how often they are talking about this as well. It's a surprise for me coming from a world where at Instagram, we did a weekly all hands and we talked about product 95% of the time, and maybe 5% of the time we talked about something else that was going on in the world or around the company. Probably maybe I'm underselling our like go-to-market. Maybe it was like 80-20, but it was definitely a very, very heavy product. And I remember at Anthropic, about 6 months in, myself and Kate Jensen, who's one of the leaders in the sales organization, did a joint all hands where we talked about our how we're doing product and go to market together. And people were like, "This is so great! I finally understand our product strategy and like what we've been doing." I was like, "Oh, right, this is not quote unquote a product company. It is a very mission-driven AI company with like a very strong sense of like why it exists in the world." I think in terms of the overall impact on the Valley, it remains to be seen. I think the positive signs that I've seen, or interesting signs that I've seen, are like a renewed interest in philanthropy across the board. And I think that's something that has been written about. And I think it will be an interesting sort of outflow. Again, who knows how all of this goes, but like depending on how it goes, it could mean a lot of interesting new sort of philanthropic deployment. And then I think the other piece is, the conversation around how AI could or should go is one that is happening in real time with the technology versus retrospectively, which I think has been the case for other technology waves, and I think that is a good thing.
Interesting.
Mike, you talked a little bit about Anthropic has this gap that it sees between the capabilities of the models and where everybody is building products. And with Labs, what you try to do is get ahead of that so you can show people what AI might be able to do now and 6 months from now. So please tell us like what you're building, where you see the potential, and what people should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, it's a roadmap.
Oh, and if I can throw and what you're building now, but also if you have a pie in the sky like Elon Musk data centers in space type ambition, I want to hear about that too. Tell us everything.
Great.
Like,
You have 13 minutes left. Go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The rest 13 minutes is the monologue in my product. I think maybe two themes I'm really excited about that we've been exploring a lot. The first one is giving Claude an environment where it has more agency and it also has more self-knowledge. And I'm going to unpack that because that's like a lot of AI words. But I'll give you an example of where we are currently doing a bad job of this. Like if you are in a Claude project and you make a file with Claude, you're like, "That's great. Can you add it to our project?" Claude will be, "No. You have to go download the file and go drag and drop into this thing." And you're like, "What?" Until yesterday, I would have said the same thing about Claude Design and Claude Code, where if you're in Claude Code, you're like, "Cool, like I need a design for this thing that we're building." Or you're in Claude Design and you make a mock-up and you want to go build it. Be like, "Cool, here's a zip file." And you're like, "What?" And I think, so that's a little bit of interoperability. But in general, this theme of if you give Claude a lot of notion of its environment. I was talking to actually a customer, like an API customer, and one of the things that they were experimenting with is actually even giving Claude like a secure version of their source code while it's running in the agent loop in their product, so that if it hits an issue, it doesn't go like, "I don't know, I hit an issue." It can be like, "Well, it's probably this thing," at least when it's talking to one of the sort of maintainers of the software. And so that overall theme, and of course you have to do it with safeguards and like be really careful about what you unlock with it. It sounds kind of obvious, but it's actually night and day in terms of how expressive these products end up being able to be, right? And you can even see it going from like maybe like core chat or classic chat in Claude AI and something like Cowork, where it's got a little bit more agency and it has a runtime and it's able to sort of like understand a little bit about its environment. But I think we are at like 10% of the journey about where we could go. Actually, one of the reasons I think people got excited about things like OpenClaw is seeing how a harness that is modifiable and you can talk to it about things and you don't ever get the sense of like, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that. You're gonna have to go to this like settings screen and turn it on." It's just a thing it has access to, and hopefully with like the right guarding and permission. So that's like theme one that I'm like extremely excited about. And I think if we do it right, should actually like transform all of our products like from head to toe. The other piece is, and I'll maybe like share like the not the internal product we're working on, but like the phrase I got as feedback was like, I think closing the gap. I mean, I talked about closing the gap between capabilities and reality. I think it's also closing the gap between how people understand their own work and then how the actual day-to-day is to do that work. I was talking to somebody internally who's on our privacy team. And to move a ticket from like one queue through another one via the task tracker into another one was like 8 different steps of copying and pasting, of like manually moving. Pretty, like kind of annoying to have to do. Probably error prone. You have to like keep spot checking it. And we helped her with one of our labs projects to basically like make that not a pain. And she's like, this is the first time in my career, and she's like been working for 30 years, where like what's in my head and what I am using is like now this, like it is now closed. And I want to like bring that feeling to everybody who like, of course Claude unlocked a lot of, non-technical people being able to code, but like we're still asking people to understand way too many concepts of like, what is the difference between like my sandbox environment and production, or like connected MCP as myself or others, or how should I store data? And of course you can't abstract everything, but like if you combine both of those themes, if you give Claude a lot of self-knowledge and you're creating an environment where it can actually solve complex problems for people in like repeatable ways, I think I get like very, very excited about those.
And your moonshot.
Yeah.
I'm not letting you off the hook. What's your moonshot?
Moonshot?
Yeah.
Nothing in space, although I guess we're talking to SpaceX about spacey things.
Wait, you're talking to
Spacey
SpaceX?
things.
I mean, those are
Right,
Well,
right,
the
right,
announcement for compute. Yeah. It was exploring extra orbital. What was the phrase? Something about exploring like post-orbital world things.
Definitely
There's
not my department, but yeah, there's stuff in.
Are you so?
literally
The labs isn't working specifically with the team on compute,
right? Exactly.
Or
There's
chips.
a separate.
Totally
compute thing,
separate.
yeah.
Okay. So you're moonshot.
Yeah.
Do you personally believe in data centers in space?
I had a conversation. I'm far from a data center expert, but I talked to somebody who is a person who sends things to space, who's not Elon Musk. And
That's what you would say.
Yeah. And they were really bullish, and I was like trying to talk about why, and it was basically like I guess effectively infinite power if you convert it well, and infinite land. And I was like, okay, you can buy that. I mean, and I think they feel good about the shielding you have to do. Again, clearly not my area of expertise, but after that talk, I was like, okay, I see it.
I see it. Yeah.
Even if it's going to take a few years. At first, I admittedly thought it was a crazy idea in general, but now I'm like, oh, I actually really can understand why this might make sense.
When you were talking earlier about the ways that the work in Claude is going to get compressed and all those steps, I couldn't help but think of tokens and how, maybe it's good for your business model in the short term if people have to take so many steps and use so many tokens, but tokens have become this unit of economics that we're using to describe the industry now, and people are token maxing, and now they're tokenizing, and one, I want to hear where you sit on that spectrum if you're a token maxer, and two, is there a near future in which the industry is not actually measured by tokens? It goes the way of MIPS or dial-up or some other, there's some other unit of measurement that actually defines the economics of this era.
Yeah, I think both of those are really interesting questions. It was interesting earlier this year when you started hearing about like companies that have like dashboards showing like who used it the most. And we, of course, have like internal metrics as well. And we found that there's not a lot of correlation between like the person who's using the most tokens and like the person that it's an interesting thought actually maybe to do at your companies is like write down your 10 most productive people that you think are most productive, and then like get your top 10 token users and see how closely they correlate. At least for us, it wasn't that correlated. So it seemed dangerous to sort of like purely glorify the like maximal usage. Obviously, it's like very gameable, but even beyond that, I think it's yes, you can ask Claude to do 10 different variants on something, but if you thought about it deeply, maybe you would choose 2 that you thought were most promising, and the third one if you then had like some iteration on that as well. So I would not say like a token max. Actually, the tokeniest thing was that conversion thing I did, which was like a couple million tokens. There's like a lot of tokens that it took to convert the thing from Python to TypeScript. But I think people are being more thoughtful about these different pieces. And one of the things we look at whenever we look at a model launch is not just model intelligence, but we're also really thinking about model intelligence and effort and token efficiency as that combination. And I think that's a big lever we have to improve is how do we continue to be more and more token efficient for a given task so that you can also, hopefully you don't have to think very hard about this, we can do this automatically, but like we're able to tune the solution to the problem a little bit more. And then to your second question, yeah, when I was still in the CPO seat, I was thinking a lot about sort of outcome-based pricing as something that would be really interesting to do if you could do it. And of course, if you talk to like the Sierras and Fins of the world that have like a really clear, like we kept this, we were able to solve this customer request and not have it go escalated, like that's really clear. it gets so much fuzzier on these like tasks that we actually ask Claude these days. Like I had a strategy document. I used Claude to critique my strategy document. Like, what was the outcome? It's like, well, I don't know. It's like, tell me how the strategy goes 6 months from now. It feels like it's going to be very hard to capture that as well. But I would like to see some more experimentation around, can you better capture like what it's worth, to the individual and then, or the company, and then can we find the best way to do that as well? And I guess the most concrete thing we've moved towards that in, we have a product called Claude Managed Agents, where we'll run all of the infrastructure for you in terms of doing all of the, agentic harness and calling the tools, et cetera. And you can either do it in sort of the normal mode, which is you give it tasks, we'll go through tokens, it'll tell you when it's done. Or we have an outcome-based mode where you can say, here's what good looks like, here's a rubric, go and do it, and it'll go off and make it more outcome. So like if everybody had moved on to that API, then I think maybe we could have a different sort of outcome-based pricing, but we'll see how that gets adopted.
John, or the guys in the back, do we have the random image? Can we show the random image? If we can, great.
I'm excited, the random image.
Oh, here it is. Okay, it's just because we didn't have a good label for it, so we just called it the random image because it might come up at any point. But this is a chart from the Financial Times, speaking of utility, where it shows the amount of app releases that have come out, which are skyrocketing, and then apps with significant usage that seem to be going down, and app reviews, which seem to be going down. Yeah. So Mike, I'd love to hear you respond to what we're seeing in the image here. Is it possible that like everybody's coding and releasing, but we're not really seeing a big boom in productivity?
That's really, I think there's definitely a power law in app usage in general. It'd be interesting to seeing if any of those app release became one of the apps with significant usage.
All right, we could take it down. Yep, go ahead.
I think this ties into something that I've been thinking a lot about, which obviously my background is in consumer, and I've been wondering what the consumer AI breakouts will end up being. And I don't know, we've seen a lot of them yet. And I think part of it is, I don't know how far back that chart goes, but when we were releasing Instagram, it still felt a little bit Wild West in terms of the apps. Like people were excited about apps, and like two kind of random people released an app and we were able to get to like #1 in photos and video within 3 months, right? I think that is much harder now when you think about how consolidated the top 10 is and how much time is spent on like the TikToks and Reels of the world. It's a lot, right? And so I think getting that breakthrough consumer experience, I think, is really, really hard. So I think that is as much a story about how sort of consolidated consumer products are these days, #1. #2, how entrenched or how powerful it is to have that sort of data, people call it data gravity, like the data gravity of something like your Google Docs are in your Google Docs. So even if somebody has a like 2x better AI-powered, doc editor, you're gonna move all your stuff? Maybe, probably not. So I think that it speaks to the things that are sticky. I think about it a lot. It's like the hard stuff is still hard. Like making something people want still really hard. We have amazing models internally on Anthropic. Not all of our products work, right? And so I think that's a bullish sign for like product people like me, because it means that I think we hopefully still add value. But I think that chart is maybe another place, which is like it's harder in many ways than ever to break through, even if you can code more quickly. And could we have done Instagram in a month instead of 3 or 4? Probably, but we got there after like a long winding turns and twists and turns process.
You had, I think, 18 people at Instagram when you sold it?
13.
With these tools, do you think you would have, how many people do you think you would have had?
Well, it's really interesting because of those 13,
just give us a number, because like everyone's like, oh, $1 billion one person startup. How close could you guys have gotten?
I think we could have gotten there with like 4 to 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the thing that we would have done if we'd grown it, we'd be able to do things in more than a single track. Like Instagram was. Have you ever watched my 5-year-old plays soccer now, by which I mean like the ball is there and every single person runs to the ball. Like that was our product team. It was like video, go, and everybody like goes and works on the one thing, and like we'd be able to like play positions. Like Android, we built in about a month for Instagram. We could have done it probably in a week with the models. And to build Android, we took everybody off iOS, and we all like relearned to code in code Android OS, and then we went off and do that. And like for that whole month, we were barely shipping updates on iOS. So I think you can be a lot more. Actually, a really good example. There's a labs project I have internally that helps accelerate how Anthropic engineers like code and do code review. And that project, I am maintaining an iOS and an Android version of. and I basically have the Claude that works on the iOS one basically like ping the Android one and be like, hey, I implemented this. Sorry, Android users, it's still the second one, even in ALM world, sorry. And then the Android version is like, okay, I'm going to do this. Oh, that doesn't count because that feature doesn't make sense here. I'm going to drop it. And of course, we wouldn't have been able to delegate all of that at Instagram, but we sure could have done a lot by having sort of platform parity. Like this dream of platform like close to parity is now actually quite doable.
You're probably going to get calls now from the remaining 6 or 7 people on your Instagram team going, did I make the cut in the new era? Also, it sounds like you probably could bring Gotham back now if you really wanted to.
I forget if we eventually, I think for April Fool's, maybe we brought it back one day. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, last question. Yeah.
Okay. My last question for you is, you worked on a product that now, as it has evolved, is in many ways ethically fraught because of some of the harms that people are concerned about with children. And when you talk about the fact that there hasn't really been a big breakout consumer app for AI, I think there has, and it's chatbots, right? And chatbots have also led to some real dangers and harms for young people. And so when you are building in labs, how are you thinking about the potential harms and the risks that come with just making this technology that much better?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certainly products that we have either prototyped or conceptualized and been like, this product, it sounds so hypey, I hate this, but like this product, if shipped, would be bad for the world, or like would nudge people in the wrong direction, or even if we did it right, the like wrong or like more morally fraught version of this would be actively, we think, bad. And so I think asking that question a lot internally makes a difference, and it's a luxury to have core products and models that are doing really, really well. So we don't like that in some ways an easy decision, even if we think it could get a lot of use. But yeah, I think going back to an earlier conversation, I think front loading it is really valuable and really thinking through, like, it is now more normalized to have people at a company, and definitely Anthropic does, who are like economists thinking about the impact of the thing that you're building on the world. And that just was not the case along the years on most of social media, I think. Yeah.
Mike, it's always great speaking with
Thanks,
you. Thank you again for bringing your insight today. And let's do it again soon. Yeah. Let's hear it for Mike and Lauren. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. All right, are you guys ready for our last conversation of the day? Are you having a good time? All right. So in 2015, Greg Brockman, Elon Musk, and Sam Altman started a nonprofit called OpenAI. And the plan was to pursue artificial general intelligence. The company, or the nonprofit, when it was a nonprofit back then, began in Greg Brockman's living room. And these folks were convinced that achieving artificial general intelligence, or AI, on par with human intelligence was possible. And to be honest, most people in the Valley thought that that was an interesting side project, but most of the attention was on social media at the time. Well, fast forward 11 years, and here we are. OpenAI is probably going to go public within the next year at a $1 trillion valuation. They're going to announce, likely, because third-party data is showing it, 1 billion users in ChatGPT fairly soon. And they, of course, raised the largest venture capital round in history at $122 billion. So they are at the leading edge of a technology that has captured all of our attention and is changing the world. And so when you listen to Greg Brockman, one of the things that you can see, even from his conversations all the way in the past, is a clear conviction and an understanding of where this technology would lead and where the products would go. It's amazing. You listen to the podcasts from pre-ChatGPT, or really in the early days of the GPT models, and you can hear Greg speaking with absolute clarity about where the models and applications would go today. So I think to close our day, let's take a look into the future of where OpenAI and the frontier is going in a conversation with Greg Brockman. Let's welcome Greg. Great to see you, Greg.
Thank you for having me.
Greg, this is our 4th time speaking, and we've spoken every time about OpenAI's product direction. And I think I'm starting to get it. There was this conversation that a super app was the wrong term for what you were doing with the app that you're building, bringing Codex, which is the coding side of OpenAI's product, browser, and ChatGPT together.
And when you use the word super app, people would be like, no, a super app is actually something that you can just use every other app within. And now, as we've seen these products come together, actually super app might be the correct term. At least for us on the outside, we're starting to see it. That when you need to do anything, it will start with a prompt in ChatGPT, and then OpenAI's technology will use either your browser or your computer to get that done for you. Is that the right way to think about it?
I think that's a pretty good perspective, right? And I think to really zoom out, the thing we're actually trying to build is an AGI, right? That if you think about what people have been using since ChatGPT, it's a language model, right? There's a big gap between these. It's amazing you can talk to chat, talks back to you, great, wonderful. But when we launched in 2022, there was no memory, right? It's not hooked up to any tools, has no context. And so it really is that this conversational intelligence is only one part of what people really need to get work done, to be able to achieve their goals. And where we're going is to have an AI that's really looking out for you, right? That you can provide the goals, the directions, that it's constantly thinking about what can I do for Alex today, that it's able to go and solve super hard problems, very mundane problems. You wake up, your inbox is organized, but also if there's like a health plan that you are thinking about, that it can help you achieve that, figure out medical treatments, or sort of back and forth, provide you with that kind of information at least. And I think that the question of, well, what's the interface you want? What is the product that you want? Is what we spend a lot of time thinking about. And the answer is, you want almost no interface. You want no product, right? You want this to be like, what's the interface between you and me, right? Just being able to talk to a persistent entity of some form that's able to go and accomplish goals for you. And so building that is hard. It will take time. But we have a lot of the pieces, right? And we're increasingly bringing together the product layer, trying to make the models better, trying to make the whole system just so there's less like clicking buttons and toggles and changing modes and all these things. Not to say that there won't be some of those along the way, but the long-term trajectory is towards simplification, unification.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say the interface will melt away. And so to go a little bit deeper with my question, many of us who use products like ChatGPT today will see that the bot will make a suggestion at the end. You ask it about nutrition and it says, should I make a health plan for you or make a diet plan for you? You ask it, sorry, Ranjan, we just talked about travel, but you ask it about travel and then it will give you an agenda, for instance. And so am I hearing you right that what's going to happen within ChatGPT, just to give an example, is you talk to it about your health decisions and it might say, you probably need to, go to this specialist, let me make an appointment for you. And then it will go and actually take that action on your behalf. So it goes from simply a conversation interface to actually understanding your intent and then going out and accomplishing that for you.
That's exactly right. And I think that if you've used Codex, and by the way, how many people in the room have used Codex?
A lot of people.
Yeah, a decent number of people. And that our goal is to really bring the power of Codex to everyone, right? To bring agents to everyone. That technology exists right now, right? You can hook up, like I hook up my Codex to Slack, to my Gmail, to my calendar, and there are many people within OpenAI, non-technical users. It's got code in the name, but it's not really about code. It's really about having this general purpose tool-using harness, an agent. And the kinds of things, for example, someone on our comms team does is she was organizing an event and it would just ask all of the event attendees for their dietary preferences, set up the whole seating chart, kind of did all of that work so that she could focus on the parts that she wanted to and really thinking about the vision of what she wanted to achieve. And I think that we're going to see this across the board. So it's not sci-fi anymore to think about an AI that's hooked up to these tools. And I remember with our very first attempt at tool use in ChatGPT was 2023, I think in like March or April or something, we released plugins. Do people remember plugins back in early chat days?
That didn't work.
It didn't work at all because the models weren't ready, right? The form factor is correct. Obviously, you're going to have an AI that's able to like talk to your Gmail, like no question, but we could only like have 3 different connectors exposed to the model at a time or start forgetting. We had like 2K, maybe 4K token contexts. Like there's just no memory, right? It's kind of like when you had early computers in the 60s or 70s or something, right? Or, you know, you had tiny little memory banks. And today you have your phone that's like better than any supercomputer from that era. And I think that's where we're going with these models, right? That the rate of improvement has been so steep. So now you can have hundreds of different tools accessible, that we have the ability to hook them up to whole file systems. So you can almost have the full power of the internet and like almost any application you want at the model's fingertips. And it's smart, right? It's got 512 million token context, depends how you squint on it. And the capability level is also getting so powerful, right? These models are now solving unsolved math problems and physics problems, right? Really helping people be able to achieve things they couldn't otherwise. Like we are on the edge of this era of agents really transforming how we all operate, whether it's in software engineering, finance, legal, sales, and in our personal lives too.
So just to unpack that example that you were giving, one of your colleagues is chatting with ChatGPT about an event, and then suggest, hey, how should we, contact event attendees about something? And instead of like saying, okay, I have to do that, and going into an event program, basically what happens is the interface will take over from there. Once it says it's a good idea and you agree, and then hook into whatever tools you're using, and then do it for you.
Exactly. So it uses its Gmail connector, searches through your inbox to find all the people who are attending, and then if you're on the like whatever dietary restriction, sees, oh, these people I already have their dietary restrictions, these people I do not, drafts an email. Depending on exactly how you have things set up, it might say, hey, I drafted these emails, can I send them? If you have a connector that doesn't even let it send emails, it says, I drafted it, you need to send them. In a different world, you could also imagine that you've built enough trust with the system where it says, I drafted the emails and actually sent them. And I think that this actually points to a really important aspect of the agentic era, which is trust, right? That we need to really learn how to build trust with these systems, where they're good, where they're not, figure out what you want to delegate to them and how you want to entrust them with responsibility. And that's something we view as earned, right? It's not something that we can grant, but by providing lots of tools and control and oversight and supervision to the operator, to the person who this AI is operating on behalf of, like we think that is going to be such an important thing. So that's a key product feature and differentiator.
Yeah, and when you go back to some of the early attempts at this, there was this like move that OpenAI had to let you call an Uber within ChatGPT. And it followed a long line of companies that have tried to get you to take action within chat, but it never really took off. And the difference here might be that the chatbot can take control of your browser or take control of your computer, and then you don't necessarily have to worry about like, is this plugin going to work? It goes and accomplishes that for you by taking over your machine. So I wonder, if you expect a fight from the user interfaces that we have today, AKA like all the other apps, all the software, where to be truly useful, ChatGPT will have to not be blocked to be able to go out and execute these actions on behalf of a user.
Well, look, first of all, I'd say that this is not theoretical at this point, right? That people have been using Codex, so it's a separate product, separate app. You have to install it separately, really started to focus on software engineering. But the amount of non-software work that has been happening in Codex has been absolutely exploding, right? It's been this like incredible exponential curve, exactly the thing that you would expect. And within OpenAI, we basically have the same level of penetration now and usage as Slack, right? It's like everyone in OpenAI is like an entirely Slack-based company. We do not use email for the most part. It's like really like if you're not on Slack, you're not going to do any work. And it's kind of feeling that way now with Codex app as well. And that everyone's Codex is hooked up to all of these tools. How the ecosystem evolves, I think it's going to be a very nuanced thing, because I think one thing that is very important is that we believe that there should be an ecosystem that gets to be vibrant and thriving, and that people can really build and see the benefits. And so we've actually seen this from partner companies where, I remember there's a couple different partners where we said, hey, we really want to train our AI to be really good at using your software. And we didn't know what they would say. And actually, the response we got is this is the most partner-friendly outreach we've ever had, right? That the idea that you will make your AI specifically good at using our tool, and they just see the opportunity because their tool will be used just so much more as a result. And that everyone is trying to think about how do they not just survive as a company into the AI era, but thrive? Like, how do you really get the advantages of the fact there's going to be so much more activity? And if you don't have AI in there, if you shut it out, then you're actually going to be declining, not thriving.
Right. This kind of makes puts OpenAI. So first of all, you talk about people using Codex. So one of your colleagues shared, and I think you've talked about this too, that you've brought ChatGPT into Codex so you can bring Codex into ChatGPT, which is basically like if we're users of ChatGPT, this experience that we talked about of ChatGPT not only suggesting what you might want to do next, but going to do it for you, that's going to happen. And so it makes you effectively an operating system, don't you think? But not the operating system like an iOS, where you would like go open up your phone and then tap different apps. It's almost as if all interaction with all apps will happen through this interface. Is that the ambition?
I think that you could describe it that way, but I think of it a little differently. Like the way that I think about this is that what is the ideal interface to an AGI, or we call it kind of a personal AGI. And I think that it's, again, the same interface that you and I are using right now. You just want to talk to an assistant, right? You want to talk to something that can go and work and operate on your behalf. And so that, yes, like that agent, that AGI, that AI will have its own computer, right? It'll have its own access to things. It maybe can, like ideal coworker would be they can come over and type things on your computer too. So some delegated access to your own system, and maybe you delegate access to your inbox sometimes. Maybe it has its own inbox with some sort of window into the things that it needs. You forward emails to it. These are not actually, if you think about it, this is not unprecedented, right? It's like the way that you work with an assistant who's a person that we've actually, or any coworker really, we've spent a lot of time really thinking about how do you build these trust boundaries and make sure that you're able to operate together. And so I think of it as just a different thing. It's not, you could think of it as an operating system, but an operating system is almost something from a different time, right? It's a different layer of the stack. This is really more about how do you interface with technology broadly. And I think that the beautiful thing about AI is it's really about bringing the machine closer to the human rather than us having to contort ourselves into like files and folders and like all of these details that somehow are not natural, right? That are more about how the machine operates rather than how we operate.
Yeah, talking about a personal intelligence, it's sort of, I don't know, did you watch WWDC last week?
No, I missed it.
I was banned, but I watched it on TV. Come on, Apple. Anyway, it does look like you and Siri, the new Siri, are going to come kind of into competition, right? Because they're an app that's going to sit, or an intelligence that will sit on top of all of your apps and let you take action. And ChatGPT will be an app on the iPhone. So then talk a little bit about whether that positioning is going to be difficult for OpenAI and how you're thinking about that strategically.
Well, I just think of it a little differently. Like, I think that we're in the beginning of this new agentic era. And the way that this has always gone in AI is that when you have a new level of capability, it means you have an opportunity to rethink everything, right? Rethink how people interface, what the technology is capable of. And I think that this is no different, right? In my mind, like the kinds of things that I see on the horizon, for example, AI for solving scientific problems, right? And I think we're starting to see the inklings of this. Like, for example, today we announced we have in peer-reviewed literature doctors who are using O3. Remember O3?
Yep.
That was like forever ago now, right? That was like one of our earliest reasoning models, using that to find diagnoses for people who I had no answers from doctors for many, many years. There's an example of someone who had spent 20 years with a mysterious ailment. Finally, it's been diagnosed through the use of this technology. And if you're like, okay, you've got models that can do that, and then it's really about like, the same like distribution and like, can you get access to an app? To me, it doesn't type check. It's like we have something fundamentally new. And so that's not to say that there won't be competition. I actually think that there will be, and it's going to be great for everyone. But I just think that the ways in which you're going to use this technology, the things it will be capable of and what it'll make you capable of doing are just totally different from anything we've seen before.
I was going to ask you, well, does it mean that you'll have to, create your own device, assuming that like my concept is that you're going to have to go through Apple to get to the user, assuming that's somewhat valid. But the answer is you already are, right? So OpenAI is working on a device right now.
It certainly has been publicly reported.
I was in your office in December, and Sam told me that this is happening. It's multiple devices. So if you think about the way that, again, you're going to interface with these AIs, how does that device play in, or series of devices?
Well, look, I think, again, I would just step back and say that I think this is the beginning of something very new, and that I think about the way that I think, let me just say, like, I think the biggest shift that has happened in terms of interface, again, it's not even about devices and things like that. It's really about the shift from conversational intelligence, like kind of the chat paradigm, where it's like kind of you have an AI that's personalized enough to you that it's worth reading its output, right? You ask it a question, you get an answer, it's something that's useful to you, to agents, where they're capable enough to actually do things for you. Like, that is a big shift. And that implies a difference in how you want to interact. And so you kind of are just going to want a single agent that has access to your context, and this will be true in personal life, this will be true in a business context, right? You imagine, for example, having imagine you have a PhD in every field coworker, Nobel Prizes, multiple of them, and you hire one of these, you hire 100 of them, and you don't invite them to any meetings. They're not going to be very useful. And so there's something about how do you get context into the AI, and not just statically, but dynamically, right? As context evolves, as your business processes evolve, how do you have a context layer that is accessible to an AI that lets the AI operate to the extent of that raw intelligence? And so finding ways to make that AI be accessible, so available in your meetings, to make it very ergonomic, so it's very easy to get access to. I think all of that's going to require a rethink. But I think, again, it's just the core for me starts from thinking about the agentic form factor and then working backwards to how do you just make this have the context it needs. And again, the trust is going to be such a core part of making this whole equation work.
So it's kind of like having this device with you at all times and being like, I need to get that done. And it goes and does it for you.
And I think that will be part of it. But I almost even think if you don't have a device like that, it's not like you're going to be out of the game, right? Because it's this AI. It's not, because there's one version of it where you think of it where it's like the device is the AI, and you want your phone to be the AI. You want whatever custom device you're thinking about to be the AI. But it's not going to be like that. It's going to be more like an interface, like no more than your phone is you, right? It's an interface to you. It's a way that I can sort of call you up whenever I need you, whenever I want to ask you a question. And there's different ways of accessing, right? There's like synchronous phone call. I can text you. I can email you. And I think that we're going to be much the same with how we interact with our agents.
There's been some reports that OpenAI is working on these like bi-directional voice models. I think we've talked about that in the past. Like the goal is to have like an AI that you can speak with and will be able to process that and speak back with you in a much more natural way. Can you share anything about that?
No, but no. More seriously, I mean, look. I think that the general shape of the technology, like the way that we've had voice models, kind of a really cool voice experience for, year and a half, 2 years now. We first demoed it back in April of 2024. Brought it to market, maybe late that year. And the way that it works, and the way that everyone's models work, is that you basically chain together, the original way that these things worked was that you would chain together a speech to text model, then you do a text to text model, and then you would do a text to speech model. Horribleness, right? Like these three things chained together. It still has been the case that even if you have one unified model that's able to kind of take in input and then able to output a response, you still have this problem of turn taking, right? Imagine that like we have this like you cannot overlap, you cannot interrupt. It's just like once you speak to me in a turn and then you got to wait for me to finish my whole response. That is not how human conversation works. And so that we basically have like a hack where we have these models that determine, it seems like the turn has ended, and it seems like the turn has started. And we're like, why are we talking about turns, right? Like turns are so unnatural. This is the humans contorting ourselves to the machine and its limitations. And so the obvious thing that you want to accomplish is a model, an AI that works much more like you and I do, right? That's able to process input at the same time as it's processing output. And all of that is, of course, something that many people in this field are trying to run towards. I think it's going to be very, very exciting as you move to these natural, very human, fluid-like conversational interfaces. No one's seen anything like it. Like one thing that I think about is the current interaction with ChatGPT voice. In many ways, it's magical, right? So many people use it on their commute, able to ask all these questions, but it also is so frustrating, right? Whenever it breaks the magic, because it's like you realize, oh, I want to like add some follow-up, and it keeps talking over you, and it's just like that. It doesn't make sense. And so I think that part of what we need, part of like the whole point of this AI is to be something that you can interact with fluidly and naturally. And by the way, I think it's not just going to be about the sort of use case, like we kind of think about the personal use case, but it's also really the work use case. And I think some of the most magical experiences that I've had with Codex have been when operating it through voice. Like many people, we have a voice thing built in, some people use third-party apps for it, and that you just get a very different experience when you start to realize that like typing a quick message to give some feedback, easy, but like writing out a whole paragraph and everything you want, horrible. No one wants to do that, right? You just want to be like saying things, and you want the real-time feedback loop, and all of that is going to happen, and it's going to be amazing.
So let's talk about model improvement briefly. So there was a discussion a couple years ago that large language models were about to hit a wall. That was wrong. And something that I'm thinking about is, I think we're all thinking about it, is how much better can these models get, and when will the improvement stop? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that this is a place where when you're kind of building these models, you get kind of a sense and an intuition that I think is harder to get from the outside, because we see all the data points and we see also the work that goes into these improvements. One of the most mysterious and important just scientific discoveries and empirical observations that I'm aware of, that I can imagine, right? That we are able to actually build these models, and that the scaling laws continue, right? That it just is the case that you can just keep training these models, more data, more compute, better architectures, and there's a lot of improvements that go in. But every time we've kind of run into a like, oh, this isn't quite scaling the way we expect, we have a problem. We have a bug, that our math wasn't quite right, that, oh, our implementation isn't quite matching the math, whatever the thing is. And that is, I think, a very important thing to sort of internalize. And actually, we've done studies where you go back to the beginning of the field, right? That neural nets themselves were designed in like 1940s, right? Before computers, right? As a model of maybe this is how the brain processes information. First hardware implementation was 1959 with the perceptron. And if you look at landmark results in the field, that the landmark results follow this incredibly smooth, deterministic path of more compute being poured into them. And so 70 years of people, maybe 80 years now, of people saying this stuff is never going to work, never going to scale, going to hit the wall, hasn't hit the wall yet. There's still no wall in sight. And so I think that the fundamentals allow it. Now, the practicality is hard, right? Actually building these massive supercomputers, it's hard, it's expensive, it's not easy, right? That we have teams that just like work so hard to solve these incredibly hard technical problems. We have our own network protocol that we've had to design, that we have people who look at every single layer of the stack, that there's weird wiggles in the graph, and the way to think about these neural nets is that there's no abstractions, right? It's almost like any little piece that's wrong can have a ripple effect that only shows up down there, and so you need people who deeply understand all of it. And yet, if you get the right team together, put the right mission in front of people, and people do that grind, the outcome, it's worth it, right? And it's achievable and it's possible. And so I think that for those reasons, the progress will continue.
So then I'd love to hear your perspective. If models can basically progress much further from where they are today, let's say OpenAI builds the best model, and it's the equivalent of like something with like 15 PhDs with excellent emotional intelligence that doesn't complain and goes out and does stuff for you. And then the next model maker will build a less good, but it has 13 PhDs and it's like pretty good, EQ, and will still go and do things for you. So where does the differentiation come in when you get to that level of intelligence? Because we've seen the model makers kind of move in lockstep. One makes an advance, the next one comes in and makes the advance. So if they all become that smart, is it possible to differentiate?
Well, I think there are several dimensions to the answer. Number one is I do think there's a bit of an attractor state where just like from a business model perspective, every provider sells out all their compute.
Okay.
Right? I think that is just like the world that we're heading towards, where there just is not going to be enough compute to serve all the demand, right? That we're heading to this compute-powered economy, that everyone's going to be using these models all the time to be able to accomplish tasks of interest. And we just see it. It's like right now we're talking about compute constraints, and like the number of people using these agents is like order of 10 million, 20 million maybe, you know? It's like we're not at planet scale. ChatGPT is like 1 billion users, right? But we haven't brought the agentic power there yet. So you're just looking at these factors, and the depth of usage is also tiny compared to where we're going. And so I think that we're just going to be in a world where even if you have different vendors, different capability level, open source models, all these things, these neo clouds, like I think that compute is just going to be this scarce resource, and I think that it's going to go to use. So to some extent, I think that the like, is this a good business to be in and for new entrants to come into and things like that? My answer is actually yes. I think that there is like a huge market that we are just not going to be able to address, and we need much more energy and momentum there. But a second thing is that it also misses the fact that intelligence is not a unidimensional thing, right? That if you really zoom in, being good at different domains is something where even if you have a lot of raw intelligence, getting good, if you've never practiced, like you've never actually done a pitch or something, like you're not going to be good at it your first time, right? And that there's lots of different, you've never operated a spreadsheet, right? You're not going to be able to succeed at doing some complex modeling. And so I think that there is something that we have been internalizing, which is that we look across different industries and different domains, and we have to prioritize. We can't possibly be great at every single area at once. There is definitely a lot of like, hey, you just get the general intelligence up and it'll experience a lot of these things. But to really become a domain expert, to really be that PhD, and to really be something that can help push forward the ambition of a field, like that's hard. And by the way, one thing I also want to say is that I think understanding what happens when you successfully do that, I think that having a good mental model of that's important, which is you look at something like Rewind to AlphaGo, right? You remember Move 37, this move that like changed people's understanding of the game. And then now more people play Go than ever, right? And that it actually inspired people to do even more. I think we're just going to see that. And so I think that the depth is never going to stop, right? How deep can you go on science, right? Like I think that people have thought sometimes that, hey, we found out all the physics, it's all good, we're all done. And I don't think that that's the future we're signed up for. I think we're signed up for one where we're got to keep finding every time you unlock one mystery, every time you solve one mystery, it unlocks like 10 more. Right. So I think that there's just going to be so much more to do and tons of room for differentiation across different companies.
So I think I'm reading you right, and that your belief is maybe there's a way that everybody can scale up these models, but ultimately the company with the most compute is going to win. And you know, we spoke a couple months ago, and you had mentioned that like you were asked internally, how much compute should we buy? And you said all of it. And they said, no, really, how much should we buy? And you said, no, buy all of it. And OpenAI is definitely the leader in buying compute. I mean, we see the money going out. Obviously, a lot of money coming in through investment, and now you've built a business with customers. But there's a lot of money going out. Do you ever wonder, hey, do you ever wonder maybe we're not going to be able to pay all this money back because it's a brand new category?
Well, the way that I look at it is on the fundamentals, right? You need to really look at the fact that the way that compute goes is that it's multiple years out before compute actually arrives, right? Depending on exactly what you're doing. For example, we've been investing in our own chip program now for multiple years, and super exciting progress. Like, you know, we'll have more to announce actually pretty soon. But the fact that we're able to do that is something very unique, right? Really thinking about the full vertical integration of the supply chain. And I think that the world we're heading towards is one where, again, there's just not going to be enough compute in the world to satisfy all the demand. And we see this very concretely. Like you look at the exponential, I mean, rewind to the exponential of ChatGPT, look at the exponentials we're in now. You think about the problems that we are able to solve. You know, it's actually kind of interesting that we just yesterday announced, it was 2 days ago, announced a new result in basically chemistry and being able to synthesize, new improve a reaction. And all of this is without much attention. The thing I just said of if you go deep in a domain, you can really transform it. And we're not even scratching the surface yet. And so the way to think about it is the economy is so massive, right? And we see it very concretely in terms of our own growth, in terms of what people are willing to pay and kind of the size and growth of this whole industry. And so I think that the thing that I think about the most is how do we meet the demand? How do you actually have something that can help support all of the work that people want to do in the economy? And I think that is such a vast thing. I don't think any of us have internalized it yet.
Yeah, but if I may, there is a price war brewing. I mean, at least that's according to the reports. It's great to have you here to talk about it. The Wall Street Journal recently had a report that an upcoming OpenAI model might have significant price cuts. And so again, like how can, if it requires so much resources to serve this demand, and it is growing demand, in an environment where there might be price cuts, how do you make that math work?
Well, again, I look at it from a different angle. So if you look at the whole history of what we've done, we actually have been increasing the intelligence, cutting price, right, for a fixed amount of intelligence. And people somehow just like the Jevons paradox just keeps happening. And so I think frontier intelligence will always be something that is going to be, it's always going to be the priciest thing. But I think that a year from now, that level of intelligence is going to feel pretty mundane and going to be much more available. And I think that the world that we're in is one where people are starting to really think about value. And it's actually been a very interesting shift where over the past, first quarter, maybe up until now, people have just been like, this AI agent stuff, it's all new. We need to bring it into our enterprise. Like, we don't want to be left behind. How do we be part of this future? And now people are like, okay, let's make sure this is actually delivering ROI and value. And I actually think that's a great place to be, right? Because people are asking the right questions. And I hear this, I had some customer meetings today where people were saying exactly this. They're like, how can we have even just good spend controls? How can we have observability? And I think we literally today just release spend controls. So, it's like,
okay,
exactly. We are really investing hard in enterprise readiness and the tools that our customers are telling us that they need. And I think that for me is the shift that we've also been going through as a company, is really not just thinking about, hey, we're just going to release models and, have a model, really thinking about the end-to-end of the business. How do we bring this into solving real problems for real customers? And that is happening so quickly across every single industry. And the number of different companies that still feel like they're wrapping their mind around how to best make use of these models, we're learning at the same time. I think it's just so early in this whole game. To me, the absolute size of the market growing so quickly, our own revenue ramp growing so quickly, I think it's still just none of us are anticipating how steep that's all going to go.
Are you going to cut prices?
So again, the answer is always yes. Right, but it's about I think that what's going to keep happening is that we're going to have frontier models. I don't think there's going to be a massive shift in the short term. I don't think that is the kind of thing that's going to happen. But I think the thing you should anticipate is that over a year-long time horizon, to get to today's level of intelligence that feels very premier, it's going to be much cheaper. But there's going to be a new thing that is going to be so much better, and you're going to be like, why would I ever use this other one? Right? Mm-hmm. It's just how it's always going to be.
So Satya Nadella has had some interesting tweets and interviews recently. He recently said the model is becoming a commodity and the valuable asset is company, or this might be a paraphrase, the valuable asset is a company-specific AI system that continually learns from your data. What do you think about that? And is it weird to be competing with Microsoft now?
Well, look, I don't think that there's any layer of the stack here that is going to just kind of be removed from the value chain. I think that these things multiply together. And if you think about the base layer of compute, right, that is something where it's just no compute, no AI. And to some extent, you could say, oh, compute is commoditized, it just flops, who cares about it? But in reality, you look at today's chip stocks, you look at the people who are selling compute, kind of what the market is valuing people at, and they see that there's a fundamental asset here that is just so critical. And I think that is because it is a revenue center. It is something that anyone who's building AI has to rely on. And that there's a bunch of very interesting dynamics in terms of the efficiencies that you can squeeze out and the margin, all these things. But fundamentally, even though it's you kind of squint it and say it's commoditized, it's not. It's not that the value goes away. It's not that the margins go away. It's something that the market will reward because it has fundamental value, and that the importance of it's going to go up over time. You can see that with some of the prices that people are paying for H100s, right? Hoppers are, kind of, not obsolete, right? But they're a previous gen chip, and in any normal situation where you're not totally supply constrained, no one would be buying them. But instead, the market prices are up relative to where they were before. So there's this inversion that's happening. And again, I think it's going to keep happening where, because everyone has this avalanche of demand, that you're going to see prices and margins and all of these things continuing to increase at various levels of the stack. Mm-hmm. I think the same kind of applies for models, where the models themselves are also, again, they're not, there's a lot of competition there, and I think that's very good. I think it's good for the enterprise. I think it's good for customers, consumers. But I think that there's a lot of areas where, for example, our models have always been the sort of smartest ones, right? The ones that are able to solve these incredibly hard problems. I think we're just starting to reach a phase where you're going to see the transformative impact from that, right? It's like, if we're really able to speed up science through models, the smarter the model, the faster it's going to go. And it's very, very different from a model that has a conversational interface that you're able to, is able to book your travel, right? Or organize your calendar. Right. So that's also a dimension I think we're going to do a very good job in, but I'm just saying it's a different area. And then I think that the question of, well, how do you actually connect the intelligence to your own customers, right? To real value, you have all these enterprises that have built incredible businesses in different domains, and it's a huge thing. And it's not something where, if you don't have domain expertise, that you're just going to be able to do, right? And part of it is that you think about regulated industries, you think about any area where there's like, think about education, where you have a parent, you have a teacher, you have a student, you have these different parties that need to interact in very thoughtful ways. For all of these areas, all of these domains, there's a lot of value to be built by being in that area and thinking about how the workflow should work, how these models should be orchestrated. And so I really think that there's more than enough to go around, and I think that we have to work together as a whole ecosystem in order to deliver the kind of value that I think is possible from these systems.
Okay, just to go back to the Satya point one more time. He's called models a commodity. He's trying to build his own frontier intelligence. He's telling potentially your customers, hey, you got to come work with us because we're going to help build these loops that will learn from your data. He's got access to your IP, I think, till 2032. So how does it make you feel to hear this coming from Satya?
Look, I think that the most important thing that is happening right now is the usage of AI in the economy to really transform the economy and to uplift everyone. And so I think that is something that I'm really focused on. And the more that people are trying to make that happen, I think that that's better for everyone.
GPT 5.6 is rumored to be on its way. It's supposed to be, this is just a Twitter rumor, but I'm going to read it to you.
Always the best rumors.
3 times cheaper than Fable, up to 1.5 million token context, stronger agentic coding workflows. How much of that is true? What should we expect for GPT 5.6?
I mean, look, you should always expect better, faster, smarter, the whole thing.
So everything confirmed.
Definitely believe everything you read on Twitter. Yeah, maybe not.
That has actually been a source of problems in my personal life. Okay, so I want to end on health. You brought it up a couple times. You actually had a question in the audience about it earlier. Sometimes there's a story and you read it and you say to yourself, I know this person's speaking to the media, and I know that what they're saying sounds like maybe it's true, but there's something wrong with the story, and we're not going to see more of it. And I've read a couple of those recently. One is, I think, is it your friend, the GitLab CEO, Sid Sijbrandij? He got cancer and he got all the diagnostic testing he could have. So just went out and tested like crazy and fed that data into ChatGPT with the assistance of some people who had built purpose-built application for it, and was able, I don't know if cure is the right word, but to beat back the cancer to a degree. There was also this dog, Rosie the dog, in Australia. You guys heard of Rosie? Like the craziest story where this guy, I'm going to get some detail wrong, but a guy biopsied his dog, which had cancer, ran the mutations across AlphaFold, and then was able to design an mRNA vaccine that he injected into the dog with the assistance of chatbots to build this thing, which ended up being able to jump over tables again, and the tumor shrunk. When we think about the future of AI in health, help us sort out the truth with this question. Are these a couple of outliers that made good headlines, but there was something about the story we weren't hearing, or is this going to become standard in the future?
Absolutely going to become standard. Absolutely. And I personally have a number of friends who have done very similar things of get the data, right, your health diagnostics, and use Codex, right? Use these models to get insights from them. And I think that there are many people, like I think that there's about 230 million people each week who use ChatGPT for health queries, right? And that's just like a staggering scale, right? And this is people, these are people, sometimes you upload a scan, sometimes you have doctors who are telling you conflicting information. And I think that we've been in a world where patients are not empowered, right? Patients have to be the doctor, right? You're the decider, you are accountable, right? You know, doctor makes a mistake and you're gonna be paying the price for the rest of your life. Like, it's a very different kind of incentive. And this is very personal for me. You know, my wife has a number of health conditions, and I think that I don't even know how we'd be able to manage many of her conditions right now without the use of chat. And I think we're just at the beginning of this journey, right? That I think that the degree to which, even if you have the best medical team, the best access to the best experts, there's only so much that can be done, right? That you think about the things that are just outside of the reach of humanity, or even just sometimes it's like someone didn't even read the chart, right, and kind of missed a detail. All of that we should be able to improve massively through these tools. And so I think that the personalized medicine, and sometimes it's going to be about drugs and drug discovery that are for mass market, but sometimes it'll be even for the kind of N of one things like the disease diagnoses that I mentioned earlier today. Sometimes it will be for just like trying to understand conditions and trying to come up with new potential therapeutics. All of that, we're seeing it happening right now in front of our eyes. It's not theoretical, it's really happening. And so one of the most astounding possibilities of AI is how much it can improve our health. And you think about the ripple effects of the system, right? Where so much spending on the healthcare system happens right now. It's a massive part of the economy. And that if you're actually able to help people prevent issues, right, to get ahead of potential health problems, that's something that actually then alleviates a lot of burden, a lot of strain. And we're in a world where doctors are burned out, nurses are burned out, like there's like a real crisis that's happening in front of us. And I think AI will be able to help with all of that. Like, we have that potential if we deploy it and use it wisely and well. And so I think that applying AI to medicine, like that's something that is really a personal motivation for me in thinking about this whole journey of what we're building, what we're trying to do with OpenAI. And I'm hopeful that we as a world and a community can make the most of that.
Let's hope.
I think we will. I'm very, very confident.
Greg, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Oh my God, thank you everyone. You have a good time today? Thank you. Should we do it again next year? You gonna come? All right. Let me give you a perspective about what we're doing for the rest of the day. First of all, if you're backstage, Callie and John, can you come out here for a second? As I bring them out, let me explain that we're going to go from here to the rooftop. We have some drinks and food ready for you guys. We also have a space directly outside, so that is a place that you can hang out. Figure out what's busier and try to spread yourself a little bit so we'll have room. John, come up here. Callie, come up here. Guys, this would not have happened without John Bashu and Callie Nguyen. Thank you, Callie. So, true story, I announced this show on a podcast live, and I thought we would get a lot of people signing up. One person signed up. And I called both of them and I said, you know, it was great brainstorming this idea with you, but we're not going to do it. So we'll see you next year. And both of them said, let's do it. And let's do it at the Commonwealth Club. And we did it. So thank you guys. And thank you all. Before we leave, I have to thank our sponsors at PwC, Dallas and Rita. You guys are amazing, and thanks to the PwC crew. Just a great group and amazing people to work with. And of course, thank you to the Commonwealth Club here for collaborating with us on this event. Wow, 6 years after I showed up here and there was literally nobody in the audience, and we kind of have social distanced and probably would have gone to jail if London Breed found out. We're all here together, and it means the world to me, so thank you all. I'm getting emotional here. Thank you for helping me live the dream, and let's go party. Thank you.